vacation though.
With your family?
Yeah, we're going to Lanai.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Boom. And we're live. Speaking of vacations, tell me about Guyana.
Yeah, that's a good
Dude,
segue.
You've been there a bunch.
You know, I've been there twice.
Now? I thought it was 3.
No, well, I've been to Guyana twice, but between there I went to Bolivia.
Oh.
And did like very similar kind of trip. Like doing a river trip with Amerindians.
Are those people weirded out by Americans because of the Jonestown Massacre thing? Is there
Dude, it's so funny you bring up Jonestown because there's a couple things I've been surprised. Like, the main group I was with in Guyana is the Makushi, and I was surprised one day when I was they make a dish. They make a dish with cassava, which is a root like manioc. They make a dish with that. They make a flour from it and make a dish. And I was one day saying that, hey, that looks like pizza, right? No, like, right? No comprehension, like no thought of what pizza is. And I remember thinking like, wow, man, like something you take like such a, you just consider such a part of everyday life is pizza.
They didn't know what it was.
Yeah, and they don't know about Georgetown.
Whoa.
Even though it's in their own country.
They don't know about it at all?
No, it's just not. But you gotta, like, we'll get into this, but you gotta, like, realize sort of how insular, and the Amerindian communities are who live in the jungle in Guyana.
Yeah, do they have communication all? Any cell
they
phones,
do. Yeah,
or?
more and more now. And there was a lot changed the 2 times I went there, which were 5 or 6 years apart. They discovered sunglasses. And I remember the first time I was down there trying to turn them on because, they bow hunt for fish, right? Which is one of the main ways they get fish is bow hunting for fish. And when you're looking into the water, polarized lenses are invaluable. I feel lost without them.
Yeah,
trying to
they're
spot
amazing.
fish underwater. And I kept saying, man, you got to get on board with polarized sunglasses. And I'd hand them to him. He didn't like it. This guy, Rogan, he didn't like anything about having them on his face. He just like couldn't do it. But then I go down there 5 years later, and every one of those boys is rocking polarized glasses. So you see changes. But yeah, that's the thing with I've brought up Jonestown a number of times because in the U.S., if you say, "Hey, I'm going to Guyana," all anybody says is, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid."
Right.
And
it
everyone knows
wasn't really Kool-Aid? It was some like...
Kool-Aid, no.
It was a Kool-Aid type drink. No?
So when people look at... we had this conversation, because there's a couple of things that are important here. What the poison was, right? So we had a conversation. All right, let me back up. The root, I mentioned they make a
cassava.
Root. Yeah, so there's a root cassava. And
Is
it's
that
like
the poisonous stuff?
Yeah, so it's the root that gives all life.
That's what they call it?
No, but I mean, they eat fish and game, okay, river fish and wild game, and then that's like a staple that they eat every day. And the other thing they eat every day is a half dozen things all produced from cassava, which is kind of like a yam, and it's cultivated with slash and burn agriculture. And they cultivate these yams, and from it they make a flour. They make a type of grain that's like couscous. They make a syrup that's used as a coloring agent and a flavoring agent. They make a non-alcoholic drink. They make a somewhat alcoholic drink that would be like an equivalent to beer. And then they make a much more alcoholic drink, which would be an equivalent to like fortified wine.
Wow.
They make all this stuff from this root that they grow. In its raw form, when you shred the root and squeeze the shredding. So it'd be like, imagine you took a yam and shredded a yam and then squeezed the yam between your hands and dripped out a liquid. That liquid is deadly poisonous. Okay. Dogs, chickens, people, anything that drinks that liquid dies.
Jesus.
And it's cyanide. So
wow.
The Jonestown Massacre was a cocktail of the best. People think that it was Kool-Aid, Flavor Aid, Valium, and potassium cyanide. My question coming home from Ghana was, like, was the cyanide from the root? Were they like doing homemade cyanide? And so when I got home, I looked into this, and it seems as that commune, Jonestown commune, had been ordering actual potassium cyanide, which is used in a number of mining practices and other stuff. So it's an available compound, and that's what they lace the Kool-Aid with.
I'd heard about this cassava stuff. And what do they know what the process is? Like, did they know like how people figured out how to make it non-poisonous?
No.
And how, wow, it's just been done so long.
Yeah, and the same stuff with like different poisons they use to poison that people use to poison fish. What strikes me about it is how in the village, like the Makushi village I was in, is mostly Makushi, but there's also like Wapashana, which is another tribe. Carib is another tribe, but it's predominantly a Makushi village, and there's about 300 people that live in this village. And how careless they are with the liquid. Like if you nowadays, like picture like you're like the type of person that like you and me are married to and raised kids with, right? If you had that type of mom and you had a big bowl of a liquid that would kill you if you drank a bit, how that bowl would be monitored in your household.
Jesus Christ. There'd be
Right?
like barbed wire around it, electrical fence. And how do
But
they
this
do
shit
it?
just lays
They
out.
just lay it out?
And I was asked this guy, Rogan, I'm like, hey man, I kept returning to this. There's certain things I would always ask him, just like things that he struggled to understand my fixation on it. But I kept saying to this Makushi guy, Rogan, who I should back up to Guyana communication. So Guyana is it's the only English-speaking country in South America.
Everyone speaks it.
No. The government functions are English. So if you picture South America, it's northeast corner, opening out onto the southern Caribbean. That's Guyana. It's bordered on the east by Suriname, on the west by Venezuela, to the south by Brazil. It's 90% virgin rainforest.
Wow.
And within that 90% of virgin rainforest is only 10% of the population. So the coastal peoples are like Creole cultures, people mostly descended from slave trade, Europeans. In the interior are the Amerindian groups. And the government functions, sort of the power in Guyana is the coastal peoples. And there's not a ton of and there used to be barely any interplay between the Amerindian communities and the government. The government's English speaking. So you'll find that there's a lot of English mixed in the Amerindian communities. And some people, like this guy Rogan, because he's sort of he has a leadership role in his community, and he's learned just standard English very well. He's had a fascinating life, just how much stuff has changed for him. So you can just like converse, okay, in a way that you can converse in a type of the type of English we're talking right now, almost, which creates this weird tension between the things that you're discussing and how you're discussing them. Like, for instance, to have a guy just in conversational English talking about problems they're having with neighboring shamans and their own shaman, putting curses on each other. And it like creates like, there's like a strange tension between like how it's being conveyed to you, you know?
Like how so?
Like, okay, if you're talking conversational English, I guess like a life, it's almost like you'd want it to be, when he's telling you this, you'd almost want to be reading it in like closed caption. And he'd be saying it in the indigenous language, because it sounds weird to have an idea that's so foreign to us, which would be like a battle of shamans battling over access to wild animals. Okay. To have that delivered in conversational English just struck me as unusual. And because like usually when you're traveling, you're getting all of your information, like traveling in Bolivia, a guy would tell a story, and he'd tell a story in Tsimshian. No, what am I saying? Not Tsimshian. Chamane. Okay. He'd tell a story in Chamane to a person who spoke Spanish. The person who speaks Spanish would tell it to a person. No. A Chamane guy telling someone who speaks Chamane in Spanish. Then that person telling it to a person who speaks Spanish and English. And then that person giving you the information.
Whoa.
When you get it through that, it takes on a mystical quality, like you're crossing some space-time thing, right? You're seeing like these ideas discussed in their ancestral tongue, okay?
Yeah.
Do you remember I sent you a video of a guy talking about killing a jaguar,
Yes.
right? The language, you've never, like, when he's speaking, you're like, I've never, in all my travels, I've never heard a language that sounds anything like that.
Is the video online? Can we play it?
Yeah, it's online.
What do you know the title of it?
It's I think if you type in like Chimane, TSI, Chimane, jaguar attack.
See if Jamie can find it,
You'll
'cause
pull it up.
It's very cool. The language is really amazing.
So-
it seems so ancient.
Yes. It's not like, has nothing to do with like the Latin languages.
It just sounds so. It's very unique.
So I guess what I'm getting at is to hear someone talking about something in conversational English that seems so far removed from just our understanding of things. It takes on a weird quality. But what's nice about it is you can go to a place where life is so vastly different than anything we understand and just get like the straight dope right from the source.
Right,
Is
right,
why
right.
I love, it's kind of like what's so cool about Guyana, because you can go and converse with people who are very much a hunter-gatherer culture today, but just shoot the shit with them without ever feeling like you're missing something.
Wow.
It's like everything's not lost in translation and all weird and garbled and like painstaking to wade through. But you can just ask, like, hey, what's up with the local shaman? Well, I'll give you the dope on the local shaman.
And so they trade spells.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I feel like I was laying the groundwork for the Jim Jones poison.
Did you find the video?
No, I lost the word that you were spelling. The
TSIMANE.
TSIMANE. What does that mean?
Chimane.
That's how they spell it?
I
With a T?
could be screwing up. You know how you spell a lot worse when you're not actually writing it out?
Yeah, I'm terrible. I don't know how anybody wins a spelling bee ever. Chumani is TSI?
Yeah, so if you type in Chimane Jaguar, TSIMANE Jaguar.
Wow.
The whole thing is an Amerindian hunter remembers his best dog lost to a jaguar in the jungles of Bolivia.
All right, here we go. Let's play this because it's fucking awesome. Here we go. Following is an interview with a member of the Chumani tribe of Bolivia. Due to their inherent difficulties of translating indigenous languages, subtitles are at times approximate. So he's explaining where he's from. He's saying he hunts for food. I always share the meat I get with my family. I'm a good provider of meat. He's cutting up the meat in this video. I also enjoy the adventure. I love trekking through the jungle. Once I was hunting with my favorite dog and a couple other dogs. They ran ahead barking. They were going after something. All of a sudden, my favorite dog just went completely silent. They were about 50 meters ahead of me. When I got there, the other dogs had gone ahead after something. Saying my favorite dog was lying there dead, and there was a big hole in his right side, almost looked like it had been arrowed. First thing I did is pick up my dog and set him where the ants wouldn't get to his body. That dog was the bravest one I had. I'm not going to translate anymore. You guys should just watch the video if you're interested, but you get a sense of how cool it is.
So, did we fully cover the poison thing?
No, not really.
So I got home, so it wasn't the same poison, but Jim Jones, he grew up in he was involved in a Pentecostal church. He's involved in the Methodist church. Then he kind of became a healer and started his own cult. And what's funny, I was reading about him when I was trying to figure out the poison. I was reading about how he was kind of ahead of his time because the Jim Jones Massacre was 1979 in 78 or 79. And one thing that got him sideways with his church was that he wanted to have an interracial service.
Wow.
And that caused friction in his church at the time, earlier in his career. And he moved out to the Bay Area and started this church, and then he got kind of paranoid and thought that his congregants shouldn't be engaging in sexual activities, but he was siring illegitimate children left and right. They go down to Guyana, go out to the jungle, there's 1,000 of them down there. People in the U.S. from the Bay Area are kind of wondering what happened to their loved ones. They send a congressman down there to try to figure out what's going on. He shows up with a bunch of cameras. The congressman says, he's like, I'm going to help anyone who wants to go back to the Bay Area, go back to the Bay Area. He goes to the airstrip. There's a shootout. The U.S. congressman gets killed in the shootout. And then they just all start killing themselves with the poison and firearms and other shit. 270 some kids, over 900 people.
Yeah, I remember it.
It's like the defining thing. But then, when you talk to these boys, I'm like, Georgetown, like the Jonestown, or the Jim Jones, Jonestown Massacre, never drink the Kool-Aid. They're like, no.
See, I'd heard it was budget Kool-Aid.
No, that's a debate.
Some of it was,
and that's a debate. And in trying to dig around and find the source of the cyanide, which became very important to me to learn for some reason. No, and I think Kool-Aid even tried to distance himself from it.
That's probably was Kool-Aid.
But there's like some archival stuff, and I guess in this archival stuff, images like footage taken around and photographs around, people have found out that they had both Flavor Aid and Kool-Aid on hand.
That's hilarious. What it was Kool-Aid propaganda that's trying to pass the buck on the Flavor Aid.
So no thing there. And if you go up, the main river that drains Guyana is the Essequibo, and if you go way up the Essequibo, and you'll get to a stream that comes in from there called the Rupununi, and you go up the Rupununi, and then you get to the Rewa, and at the mouth of the Rewa in Rupununi is Rewa Village, and in Rewa Village you're isolated enough where you don't know about 900 Americans and some other people from other areas, dying in a mass suicide.
Wow, that's
around the time you were born.
That's fascinating. It makes sense though that they're just so removed from it.
Yeah.
Do they use agriculture? Like, how are they getting this cassava?
They grow peppers, and then they grow the cassava. And the cassava, like, it's kind of amazing. We always hear about slash and burn agriculture. So they'll go in and do a slash and burn in a spot out in the jungle. But it's like a recycled sort of slash and burn agriculture. And I'll break down what that means. So they'll go into an area and slash everything and burn it just to clear just so sunlight can make it through to the ground. So they chop the jungle down and burn everything. Then the cassava, like I said, it looks like big yams. When you grow it, you just take a stalk of an existing plant and just bury that stalk in the ground, and it'll sprout up a new crop. And so, you're close to the equator, so you don't have seasons as much. There's some seasonal variation. They do have times, they do have like their wet season and dry season, but it's like you always get about the same amount of darkness as daylight, and they don't have the wild fluctuations that we have in the temperate zone. So they can grow year round. And they stage it. So, you have a crop that's coming in, you have a crop that'll be coming in 3 months, you have a crop that'll be coming in 6 months, you have a crop that'll be coming in 9 months. And once you get a certain number of cycles, I can't remember how many cycles you get off a piece of ground, you let the ground go feral, give it a few years, and then come in and burn it again. Also, intermittently, every time you plant cassava, before you replant, you make a little fire and burn some debris in that same spot. No irrigation. You're not watering it at all. And that's the only fertilizer you're giving it, is you're burning some of the surrounding just detritus scraped up from the jungle floor that you burn there and grow it. And it is a staple of life. That and river fish and game.
It's just such a wild thing that it's such a poisonous plant.
I don't get it. There's other stuff there's other poisons that are extracted. Like people in South America in the jungles, people that use blow darts, so people that hunt with blowguns, it's generally understood. Like even talking to the Makushi who hunt with bows and arrows, I asked them, like, why don't you guys hunt with blow darts, blowguns? And he explained to me we don't need to, because we have arrow plant, which gives arrows. Now, if you were in this other area, more up in the mountains, and there's no arrow plant, then you'd hunt with a blow dart.
So is arrow plant just a plant that makes like a shaft like?
Makes the arrow.
What is it? What is the
It's
actual?
It's like a cane.
Huh.
You know what it looks? It looks like a palm, and the palm leaf puts out these long pieces, and when one of those is ready, you cut it green, and then they can make an arrow in no time. So you go out in the jungle, find this piece, and you know, like one of the theories on how we domesticated plant species would be that it was a very gradual, unintentional domestication, where you would go out. Let me just take something simple, like let's say you eat a lot of raspberries, okay? You go out and you gather raspberries and you bring them home and you eat them near home. And then people are eating these seeds and shitting these seeds out. And pretty soon there's a lot more raspberries growing around your home village, just for the simple fact that you're always bringing the seeds home and discarding them around and creating it. So they have, except for Manioc, which people don't even really, I don't think it's really well understood what it came from. It's been domesticated for a long time. All the plants they use are widely available in the jungle, but tend to also have some around home too, that they've brought home and planted nearby, or they just grow up there now because they've been bringing the stuff into their village for so long. So arrow plant is readily available. They cut the arrow shaft green, and it looks like just a green dowel, but it has some curvature to it. Then they'll come home and they start a fire, and they heat the green thing just by twirling it over the embers or over the flame, twirling it and getting it hot, and it'll let off a little steam, and then you bend it, and then you twirl it and get it hot and bend it, and you'll eventually make it, well, arrow straight. Then they make 4 different kinds of arrows depending on what they're hunting for. So let's say you were making an arrow to, it gets even more, so let's say you're making a big game arrow, all right? And the big game they hunt would be red brocket deer, white lip peccary, which is a favorite, collared peccary, which we call javelina, and sometimes tapir. The arrow they use for that, so they would take that, so let's say they're going to build one of those. So they take that green shaft and straighten it. The next step is they find a wood called bullet wood, and they cut what would be like what's going to form the base of your tip, the base of your spear. And that bullet wood, they fit into the end of the green shaft, which is almost like it's almost a picture of having the consistency of bamboo. And they shove that bullet wood in there, and it forms like a base. And to that, they take an old machete blade that they cut out and file down to be about a 4-inch steel knife. And that goes into the bullet wood that forms the junction between the arrow shaft and the steel piece. That's the only man-made material they use in their arrows. Then they take a plant that looks like yucca, and they make their own string, and they got little bits of rubber from rubber trees that they wax the string with, and they put a bullet wood knock in, the part that your bowstring actually pushes on, and that gets tied in to the arrow shaft, and then they fletch the arrow with feathers from guan or black curacao or crestless curacao. And that's what they fletch their arrows with because they're very water resistant.
So their broadheads are made out of machete blades.
Yeah.
And is this a recent innovation
for
them?
They used to use wood.
And how long have they been doing it with machete blades?
In his lifetime, it's always been, they don't call them machete, they call them cutlasses. In Roven's lifetime, Roven's 32. He's kind of my main friend down there that I hung out with both times I was down there. In his lifetime, he remembers people using wood blades, which is made from like a bamboo-like material. So it'd be like a convex spear point cut out of bamboo and sharpened. He remembers people using those, but he had always used cutlass blades.
Wow.
Now, in Bolivia, you'd see people who are just using the old form. Their other arrows, when they make arrows for hunting birds and they make arrows for hunting fish, the only man-made material on those arrows is hog wire fencing. So basically wire fencing, they snip out the hunks of wire, smash it down till it's flat, and then they can cut barbs in there to hunt birds and hunt fish.
Wow.
The bow it's not a laminate bow. So they make a bow by just cutting a tree, single piece, a single stem tree, shaving it down to what they're after, and then take that same yucca plant, pull out the fibers out of the yucca strands and make bowstrings. That goes very quickly as well. Like we made a bowstring one day.
Wow.
Yeah. You just you take the strands and twist them, like imagine like you're rubbing your hands to warm them up. You got all those strands in your hands and you roll them, and it makes strands that are comprised of, a dozen fibers. Then you start braiding up from there until you braid up a big long bowstring. And that's how you string your bow.
So when they're shooting their bow, like what's a long shot for them? Like 15,
20 yards is a long shot.
Long shot.
And the length of shot you're going to take sort of depends on, well, they don't really think, like, the idea that you're going to wound it and it's going to get away doesn't weigh on them very heavily, right? Like in our culture, in our hunting culture here, we've come to like really, the wound loss is something we do a lot to avoid. Okay. There's a lot of talk. We're always talking about, you shouldn't be surprised to get a good hit. You should know what's going to happen. Don't take shots that are too far away, right? We really put a strong value on, when you let the arrow go or when you let the bullet go, you damn sure know that you're going to have a quick, clean kill. Well, at least we put a lot of value on that. In practice, sometimes that stuff goes out the window, but anyone would say that that's your goal. Not on their mind. You see them take some Hail Marys, right? And they can shoot, like if you're trying to shoot a bird, all they're trying to do is get a wire point. So one of those arrows I described, fitted with a long wire on the end, cut out of a piece of steel fence with a couple of barbs filed into it. And that head is joined by string to the arrow shaft, so that once the head makes contact, the arrow shaft can fall away. But there's a string connecting the arrowhead, the wire barb, to the arrow shaft, and that allows it to tangle up in the trees. So when they shoot, all they really need to do is prick that thing with that wire barb, knowing that the bird, or they hunt for a large aquatic rodents, knowing that the bird is going to get tangled up in the trees overhead, and that they can then climb up to go get it. Even then, I think even shooting like that kind of thing where you're just trying to prick the thing, 30 yards would be very long. Shooting fish, you're not shooting that. I mean, shooting fish, you're not really, like bow fishing, which I've done a lot of in my life. A 10-yard bow fishing shot is very far.
Yeah, you're right above them, right?
Yeah, because you're shooting down in the water.
Now, do you have to judge when you're shooting into the water, you have to judge differently, right? There's
way
a
different.
Refraction.
Unless that fish is sunning, and its back is at the surface or breaking the surface, you need to account for refraction. So you're aiming way low. Now, if you got a fish 2 feet below the water surface is extremely hard to hit
because it's so deep.
You're aiming at your boot. Like,
really?
You know what I mean? Well, I mean, it feels like that. You're aiming so low. There's an equation for it.
It's always low?
You're aiming way below the fish because of refraction. Like anyone who's ever taken a fishing pole and stuck it in the water, right?
Right. You see
yeah. It hooks. So that's like the trick of bow fishing. But where they bow fish, for some of the stuff, my favorite thing to bow fish down there is you're also dealing with current. And they're shooting a hollow arrow that doesn't weigh shit. It doesn't cut through the water at all. So they're holding way low for refraction and holding way upstream because their arrow is so buoyant.
Oh, wow.
Now, an American bow fishing rig, which I shoot, has a fiberglass arrow. So the current isn't as much of an issue because that arrow is so heavy that it can cut through the water. But refraction is the same. So that's why a point-blank shot bow fishing is still very difficult. And then you got to factor that you still need to hit the thing pretty good in a place where the arrow's not going to pop out. There's a fish they bow hunt for that they used to bow hunt for salted fish called the Arapaima. And Arapaima is the biggest freshwater fish in the world.
Whoa. Bigger than a sturgeon?
Yeah, the largest freshwater fish. The largest scaled, yeah. And Arapaima is the largest scaled freshwater fish.
How big is it?
Oh, I mean, they'll get them up into the hundreds of pounds.
I've never even heard of it.
It
Arapaima.
looks like it's scale strip. Arapaima.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's an Arapaima.
Jesus Christ. That looks completely prehistoric.
They have a bizarre relationship with these fish. in the Makushi do in Guyana. So
that's amazing.
They used to hunt them.
Looking critter.
They used to hunt them to export the salted meat. They used to hunt them to sell salted meat to markets. Okay. Now, one of those is worth $7,000 to them alive.
Holy shit!
Because that's how much a white guy will pay to catch one and let it go.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So it's all
a guy
about,
will pay
like,
more.
guides.
A guy will pay more. The Makushi will make more to take a guy out to catch an Arapaima and let it go than what you'd pay to hunt for elk in the U.S. on a guided trip.
Holy shit!
They get $7,000 to catch an Arapaima, and when Rogan was a kid, they would go on 2-week hunting trips where they're gone for 2 weeks with their father. They would go for 2 weeks to hunt saltfish. So they were operating out of dugout canoes that they would have to paddle, and they would they would make a dugout canoe themselves, paddle the dugout canoe upriver for a week to get to the good hunting and fishing grounds. Then they would hunt and fish for 1 week until they would get 100 pounds of salted fish. Then you'd go back downriver, which would take a day or 2 days, and then get to the mouth of the Rupununi River and paddle up the Rupununi River for 2 days to another town. And then they would haul the saltfish, including Arapaima flesh, and sell that 100 pounds of salted fish for $75 US. So 2 weeks plus work for a family for $75. And now they will not touch those fish because they make a handful of people every year go down and give them $7,000 to catch one and let it go.
So $7,000 to them must be just an enormous
It's
fortune.
changed everything. When I was talking about like that they discovered sunglasses and shit, there's been a lot, like they were already on to this Arapaima thing the first thing I went down, and it's changed everything about it's changed that village, the Arapaima fishery. The way they used to hunt Arapaimas, they would hunt them out of trees. They would, so you're familiar, like when a river, you know, a river flows in a S pattern, like repeating S's. Now and then during high water, a river will jump one of the S's. You picture what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the river jumps an S, and it abandons, in the main channel, abandons the curves of the S.
Okay.
Those curves become what's called oxbow lakes, where during high water, during a flood, those oxbow lakes are connected to the main river system. When the water goes low, the oxbow lakes become isolated. Arapaimas live in those oxbow lakes, and they feed on peacock bass and other stuff. So when the water got low, and the Arapaimas were all kind of restricted to very small little spots in the river, they would climb up in trees overlooking these places and wait for the Arapaima to come up near the surface and shoot it with an arrow that was a detachable, basically a harpoon head arrow, and shoot it with the arrow. The harpoon head would detach from the arrow, and the arrow would float on the surface connected by string to the arrow shaft. You would then go take a hand line with a hook and follow that fish in your dugout canoe until you could cast your hook out and catch your arrow. And then you're connected by your fishing line to your arrow, and your arrow is connected by the tether to the harpoon head, and you would hand line in and slaughter the Arapaima.
Jesus.
And then dry the Arapaima with salt. And they still salt fish today. Like when we're out fishing, they're salting fish all the time. They would salt that fish and then sell it. And then that became a very threatened species under that thing. And the other thing that they would hunt for is they would hunt for giant river turtles and sell the meat. And greatly depleted because their whole lives occur on this one river. And once those market influences came in and they had moved beyond subsistence hunting and fishing and they moved into market hunting and fishing, they did the same thing that we did to our own country in the late 1800s and early 1900s, is they were on course to entirely deplete the resource through market demands because their village gets more and more people all the time. It grew considerably in the 5 or 6 years between my two visits, and their environment just couldn't support that level of market hunting. So this Arapaima thing gives them a way to make money to buy staples and run a school and stuff like that. It gives them kind of an out. And it's funny because I'm a lot more interested, like personally, I'm a lot more interested in a guy shooting fish out of a tree and salting the meat than I am a dude like me going down to catch an Arapaima and let it go. So in some ways it's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad just because, like, it's not sad. It's great that they're saving the fishery, but you see, like, it's just sad to see shit change, man.
And why do they let it go? Why don't they give it to the people that live there so they can use it for the meat? Do they let it go so they can catch it again? Mm-hmm. Because they want to make sure that the population stays healthy?
So, Rogan, here's the thing that recently happened. One of those oxbow lakes got lower and lower and lower, and one of these Makushi guys realized there's 26 Arapaima stranded in an oxbow lake. And the Arapaimas are running out of water. And when the water goes down, the Arapaima will excavate. He'll keep excavating in the bottom to even just save a little spot for himself. Okay? And a guy found them, and they're all in there, but there's not enough water to cover them up. They can sip air is the thing that makes them killer. So you can always find Arapaima because they come up to gulp air.
Jesus.
Yeah,
so they can breathe air, and they can also breathe with their gills.
They have a very loud noise they make when they come up to gulp air. So they can live in low oxygen environments. Like, if you took most fish and threw them in a stagnant oxbow that's got 6 inches of water in it, I mean, they're dead as shit, right? But these Arapaimas, they can just keep excavating a little spot in the bottom and just wait, praying, or their equivalent of praying, that the water level comes back up and liberates them from the oxbow they're stuck in.
And these are huge fish.
Yeah, giants. So they found 26 that were out of the water, and their backs were all messed up from birds and other predators grabbing trying to grab the Arapaimas.
Wow.
And then they went and spent 4 days. These are 26 Arapaimas between 50 inches and upper 80s in length. They spent 4 days moving these 26 Arapaimas into the river in a canoe full of water.
Jesus Christ.
That's how valuable those fish are to them now.
Wow.
In the old days, they'd have been dead as shit, right? And you'd been like, you just sold them.
Yeah.
So they realize it's just like a finite, they have, like, on their river, the river that they call home, the river they kind of control, there's like a finite resource. But the thing is, other groups, so they're mostly Makushi, and my friend Rogan's Makushi. His wife is Wapashana. And there are other Wapashanas in other places who will come down to hunt their area. And they have very different, like, these other groups that come in have different hunting practices. Like, Rogan was telling me one time that he was going up, so like the largest snake in the world is a green anaconda. Their river has the largest thing in the alligator family, which is a black caiman. Some people say, oh, it's not a true alligator, but the largest member of that
How big are they?
familia, black caiman.
Yeah.
They get big, you know. They get bigger.
Like American alligator big? Like 15 feet?
Yeah, they get giants. Some black caimans do. There used to be a market for those. They used to market hunt those for the hides, for bags, boots, and shit. So they have the giant river otter, which is a river otter, like, way that, river otters get up to 100 pounds. They have the biggest snake, the green anaconda. They have the largest aquatic rodent in the world, the largest freshwater scaled fish. By some definitions, the largest eagle, which is the harpy eagle. The Philippine eagle has a bigger wingspan, but some, like, when you measure them by weight, the harpy from there, and then there's another harpy that's a giant, like the Papua New Guinea harpy.
The harpy is that one that eats sloths and monkeys?
Eats monkeys and shit, yeah.
That thing's fucking crazy.
Sloths, monkeys, we saw one.
Really?
So I'd been down in harpy country 3 times and finally saw my first harpy.
Wow.
Yeah, just like, it's
majestic?
Just piercing, kind of unforgettable. Just the face on it, the male face. You're looking at it. It just is like it reminded me of the first time I saw a lynx, where you're just looking at it and it's just so freakishly different than anything you'd looked at, like that harpy's face. So they have that. So he's going up the river. He's telling me this story, how the Wapashana will come down and hunt, and they hunt different than the Makushi. Like, the Makushi aren't that big on killing tapirs, but the Wapashana will come down in their area, and he says they come down with arrows that got 12-inch steel tips on them. He's like, those boys are hunting tapirs. But he said one time he was going upriver and he sees a green anaconda. And he goes to look, and it's got a arrowhead stuck into it. And he said, and I told my companion, the Wapashana are here. And they go up the river a little bit, and of course they come to a Wapashana camp. Because the Wapashana, he said, he's like, talking about this particular, there's Wapashanas all over, but he's like, this particular group of Wapashanas that travel ahead of Christmas. Because they're like, they have animist, mystical systems, but it's also infused with a certain level of Christianity. So ahead of Christmas, the Wapashana will go on a couple month-long hunting trip to get food for Christmas celebrations.
Whoa.
And they'll travel overland and by river to come down and hunt the Makushi River. And when they come down, they're playing for keeps. So they come down, they're hunting Arapaima, which the Rewa Makushi do not. They're hunting anacondas. They hunt everything.
They eat the anacondas?
Yeah, they dry all that shit. And the fat, they like to render the fat down because they feel that it is helpful for it's helpful for arthritis. We pulled up on an anaconda one time that was 13 or 14 feet long. Just sitting on the bank. You can walk right up to it. Rogan was telling me, again, a type like mysticism. I mean, we have our own beliefs that would seem absurd, right, to an outside perspective. But he was telling me, if I were to touch that anaconda with my bow, it would die a very painful death if I just laid my bow limb on it. And I'm about, how long? He says he thought about it and told me at about 45 minutes. Just a belief they have. If you touch it with a hunting bow, it will die in 45 minutes, but it's painful.
How bizarre.
I asked about that 1,000 times and never got any more clarity on it than that. I said, can you touch it with a stick? Oh, that doesn't matter. Go ahead. Touch it with a bow, it will die. So, but yeah, they don't eat them. But he was telling me, if you're really hard up and have really bad arthritis, you can take the fat from an anaconda and help cure the arthritis.
How much fat does an anaconda have?
I don't know. I never cut into one.
I've seen a rattlesnake skinned. They seem like they don't have any fat.
You got to understand how big these things are, though.
They're so big.
I mean, way bigger than your leg.
Yeah.
It's 14 feet long.
14 feet long. It probably weighs hundreds of pounds, right?
Oh, yeah. No, hundreds of pounds.
Have you eaten rattlesnake?
Yeah.
It's not bad, right?
It's not bad,
chewy.
but
look at the size of that sucker.
Yeah, there's a good one.
Jesus. Yeah, that's a heavy fucker.
Yeah.
Look at those guys struggling. 4 dudes struggling.
Oh, that's out of Guyana.
Did you ever see that movie with Jennifer Lopez?
Nope.
Anaconda. It's a giant one, like
yeah. So that's the biggest snake, and they'll eat caimans.
Anacondas will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then caimans will eat them when they're younger.
Yeah.
It's a vicious amount of everything, eating everything.
So these gentlemen, the Makushi, come down.
No, the Wapashana.
The Wapashana come down.
And have different hunting practices and different things that are acceptable to eat. And this is like a group of Wapashana.
So is
who
this
come
where
from
the
an area where the
shamans
hunting and fishing sucks?
are going after each other?
No, that was a different story.
Okay.
Now,
it's
a different piss and match with someone else. So,
so their hunting area sucks.
What's that?
Their hunting area sucks.
This group of Wapashana that come down to rape and pillage on the Rewa, Rogan explained to me their hunting area is a piss poor hunting area.
So why do they stay there?
I don't know. I don't know why they stay there. And I asked him, like, does it make you guys mad that they come down? Because now the people in Rewa Village, the predominantly Makushi Rewa Village, is on to they're on to like a pretty progressive conservation program. Like through their market hunting practices, they got a glimpse into the future and didn't like what they saw. And they're on a pretty aggressive program about sustainability. Their eyes toward the future. The Wapashana this group of Wapashana are not. And when I asked them, does it piss you off that the Wapashana come down here? The Wapashana fish with poison. The Makushi don't fish with poison.
Do they use the poison from the cassava?
No, they use a poison. They use there's a root and a leaf that are both poisonous. The root, it's a thing used here in the United States when they have to do a fish kill. Like if you get a big population of invasive fish in a waterway and you just need to like wipe the whole thing clean.
Snakeheads, stuff like that.
Yeah, shit like that. When you're trying to do a fish kill, we in the U.S. use a thing called Rogan. It's derived from a South American plant. And then there's another plant called Barbas. Well, it's like different people in different areas. In the Amazon drainage, there's a thing they call Barbasco. And that is a leaf that you just pulp. And it would look like you're just like taking, if you just imagine if you took a bunch of thyme or rosemary and put it in a mortar and pestle and pulped it, and then you take and spread that in the water, that'll kill fish. I think they act in two separate ways. There's two types of fish poison. One inhibits the fish's ability to pull oxygen from the water. So I watched them apply this poison, and you need to get an area where there's not much current because it'll just wash the poison away. So you get into one of these oxbow lakes, apply the poison, kick back 20 minutes, and pretty soon all the fish are up gulping at the surface. And then you shoot them with bows and arrows.
Wow. And what's the other way of doing it?
And rotenone, and I can't remember which category rotenone falls in, but there's another one that has some kind of it's some kind of neuro effect. It has some kind of brain, it somehow impairs some other aspect of their body. But these fish poisons are classed in two categories. I'm sorry I'm not more clear on what the two are. But I know that the ones that prevent it from being able to get air.
And the other ones that poison them, the ones that don't suffocate them, does that come up when they eat it?
No, but they were telling me that you need to watch if you're poisoning a pond, you need to watch it and make sure dogs or any livestock don't come down. It doesn't last long. And they were telling me usually the fish you don't shoot will recover if there's some amount of water flowing through it. So they might go in and build a temporary dam to block whatever inlet. Let's just say it's a isolated channel off to the side of a river. They'll go in and pretty carefully with rocks and logs block the flow coming into it, poison it, and then once they've gotten whatever they want, they unblock it and let the clean water come in, and it'll resuscitate the fish.
Whoa.
But yeah, if they said if livestock, dogs, people drink that water, it can kill that. It can kill that thing.
How many, do they lose people every year to that cassava water?
Man, in talking to me, you realize there's like a handful of things that people get lost to. They had mentioned people dying from anacondas. They'd mentioned people dying from black caimans. I know that injuries from piranhas are common. Snake bite, snakes are everywhere. In one of these, I remember we were sitting in Rovan's friend's house, his outdoor, like a palapa kind of house, with hammocks strung in it. And there just being a giant tarantula, like a 2.5-inch diameter tarantula, and not even doing anything to it.
Well, tarantulas, they just hurt.
Yeah, they hurt.
They don't really fuck you up like a black widow or something along those lines.
Yeah, and before we found a kid who'd been hit by a scorpion, a young kid, and some scorpions can be fatal. He was vomiting. He was very sick, but just a fact of life.
So when they get bit by snakes, are they getting bit by poisonous snakes?
Yeah, there's one, I think the deadliest snake in the Western Hemisphere, the coral they have.
Yeah.
They have other ones. He mentioned their chief getting hit by a venomous snake and them having to call a medevac, which is not in the Air Force. I think the Air Force came in with a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
And got him out of there, and he was fine.
Wow.
Just a fact of life. That shit's everywhere, man. But they got an eye for it, and you don't. You always, the non-local is always the one getting stung and bit and shit.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Like the first time I was down there, I got hit by an electric eel a couple times, right? That scared the shit out of me, but it's like you don't even know what's happening. You're in the water, and all of a sudden you're kind of getting like electrocuted. They're just more in tune with all that stuff.
That's a strong blast, too.
Yeah, it hurts.
We had those on Fear Factor. People had to grab them.
It's like grabbing a barbed. It's like grabbing a hot wire.
It's amazing that an animal or a living thing can generate that kind of electrical charge.
So you just did it voluntarily?
For a joke, just to see what it's like.
Yeah. It's not fun.
No, I was shocked.
Yeah, it's somewhat
I was like,
potent.
this is probably just annoying. But I reached in and grabbed it. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, that's legit.
Yeah. It's like grabbing a hot wire fence.
Yeah.
With cattle in it.
Yeah, I watched, there was some sort of a nature documentary where something tried to eat it. And the electrical eel zapped it. And you see this animal just lock up and fall over sideways.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Repelled it.
Yeah, just completely electrocuted it.
Yeah.
Got it to the point where it just couldn't stand up.
Have you? I know you like. You'll pull up some stuff. Have you seen the video of the jaguar killing the caiman?
Yes, I've seen a bunch of them.
That's solid shit right there.
Amazing.
Because you get a sense he's done that 1,000 times, man.
There's quite a few of them online. And here's what's fascinating. What is this? A caiman with an electric eel?
An alligator ate an electric eel.
Oh, wow.
And it starts just frying.
Yeah, it's just cooking them.
Really?
Yeah, wow.
No, that's not. Oh, you asked about eating snakes. Electric eel meat is not good. That's one of the many things that the Makushi like do not eat.
Look at his body just twitching. God, that's amazing. Obviously, that's a little alligator, but still, boy, what a crazy animal.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I never saw anything about jaguars killing caimans until about 3 or 4 years ago, and then there's like a whole slew of these videos coming out. It just makes you wonder. I guess maybe the advent of GoPros and all these different video cameras that people take down there and finally started catching it on film.
Yep. We missed a sighting, narrowly missed the sighting when we were down there. Tracks are everywhere. So, particularly because the time I was just down there now, the giant river turtles are nesting. So they, just like how we have, just how you picture sea turtles crawl up onto a sandy beach and dig a hole at night and lay their eggs and then retreat back into the ocean. Giant river turtles lay like that. But so the sandbars are covered in busted turtle shells, and there are vultures, so like black vultures and king vultures, and caracaras are on the sandbars feeding on turtle eggs, and jaguar tracks all over because the jaguars come down to just wait for the turtles to come up.
Wow.
So you're seeing a lot of that. And one of the more surreal
that's a perspective shot, but I bet they're pretty big, right?
Big, but that's the oceanic. That's not a giant.
Whoa, look at that sucker.
So,
how old is that fucker?
I have no idea.
God, they live hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, they're ancient.
That thing might have been around when Columbus was around.
Are you familiar with the CITES Treaty? So, things that ban international wildlife traffic. There's a couple turtles that the Makushi eat. They traditionally ate giant river turtles, and many people still do. But they call that one the CITES turtle.
Oh, wow.
Because they now know they can't traffic in this turtle anymore. So they got like the eating turtle and the CITES turtle. But an image that'll be forever burned in my mind. There's two things there's two like sights that'll forever be stuck in my mind. And one of them is a Wapashana woman in a DKNY t-shirt. Up to her armpit in a riverbank, digging out 150 turtle eggs, giant river turtle eggs, putting them in a handmade woven basket.
Wow.
Because like donated clothes, like cast off clothes, wind up, getting bundled. So you see people with like crazy American t-shirts and stuff on, where like I have like a Bob's Pizza, Santa Cruz, California or whatever, and it's just like something sent down there through Goodwill donation centers, whatever. So they'll have like brands, like famous brands that you see like people, in our culture wearing, but they'll be all like hunting monkeys in them. And like the language thing, it creates that kind of tension,
So do they recognize the CITES like regulations? Did they not eat those turtles?
Yeah, so you gather that it's kind of loose. They don't traffic in them.
But they will eat them.
Yeah. So they will collect the eggs, but they won't kill the turtles to sell.
So as they become more aware of conservation, like with this giant fish, what's the fish called again?
The Arapaima.
As they become more aware of conservation, do you see them like recognizing like, hey, there's some stuff that we have to leave alone. We got to let it recover. I mean, they obviously they're aware of the cycle of life when it comes to their slash and burn agriculture and leaving spots alone. Like, are they becoming more aware of like what animals they've kind of pushed to the brink of extinction? Yeah,
and it's like, I don't even know how much is coming from the younger generation, because talking to a guy who's, I'm 43, this guy just a couple years older than I am, and talking to him, and he was a market hunter. He's glad to see what's happened, because he, in his own lifetime, saw how much they had depleted everything. So he in his lifetime saw, like, from market hunting, not just from subsistence stuff, but as that village grew, because the village was a handful of families, right? Then now it's 305 people. As that village grew, he watched the giant river otters. They were hunting giant river otters to sell the hides into Brazil. And they would smoke them out of their dens. So he watched their numbers go down.
This is a 100-pound otter.
Yeah.
Wow.
Freaking giants, just as the name would let you know. And very vocal. A large vocabulary of crazy sounds the giant river otters make. They get, when they see you, they're pissed, and they start making crazy noises.
Did you see them?
Oh, yeah, you see them all the time.
And they're squawking at you?
Yeah.
Like, what does it sound like?
It's like a
wow.
But a lot better than that.
Look at that sucker.
Oh, there he is eating some kind of snake or eel.
Wow.
Yeah, they have an alarm noise and a number of barks and crazy sounds. So he watched those get depleted from hide hunting. Giant river turtles from hunting eggs. He said that he could see that the Arapaimas were disappearing. And so he was really glad. This guy was really glad that they'd gotten onto some other way to bring some cash into the village.
Wow. And the Arapaima fishing, how did they find out about this? Like people from the United States, or like where are they coming from?
You know, I'm not sure. You know, I know that there's been a number of companies. Costa, you know, the sunglasses company.
Mm-hmm.
Costa invested pretty heavily through a conservation program they have. Costa Sunglasses invested pretty heavily in helping them establish a guiding system down there to take people out to fish Arapaima.
So these people that come down...
And trained some of the Makushi in how to just deal with Westerners. Like, for instance, in the time... And we were out... When I'm with them on the river, we're out... I'm with them participating in the hunting and fishing activities that they do year-round on the things that they identify to be sustainable resources. Because they still hunt several days a week, right? Roving, they live off fishing game. Everyone in that village, all their protein is hunting and fishing protein and some chickens that they raise. But that's all their protein. So they're engaged in a daily sense. Like Rovin says, he spends about 2 days a week farming. He spends 2 or 3 days a week hunting and fishing. And then he has other obligations he has to take care of. But he hunts and fishes constantly year round. And it just, if he kills a white lip peccary, he says that's good for a week.
Did you bring your bow?
Yeah. I brought my bow fishing bow, and I brought a regular bow.
Now, when they saw your bow, were they like, Jesus, can you get us some of these?
You know, surprisingly not that excited about it, because I think that they know they would run up against sourcing problems.
With the arrows.
Rovin at one point in time, Rovin had a recurve, but he lost it. His house burnt down, and he lost his recurve anyways. So just for the simple fact that you can make them and make arrows very quickly, they don't need to worry about how you'd ever source parts.
Right, but they have all this other stuff like machete blades and all these different things. It seems like they would, I mean... If you could get a good compound bow, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I think if you brought one down and left it there, it would get a lot of use.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
Would it be too effective? Like, would they run into problems with, you know, like they have kind of a sustainability issue, right?
I'll say, yeah. I think that if you went down, this is speculation. I would think if you went down with a dozen of these things, and left them there, I think that along that river corridor, you would see a diminishment of a handful of bird species for sure.
Yeah, I would think
because but here's the thing. Here's why it's a little bit tricky. Because I think that you would also be reducing demand. Because one of the things about the birds, the guans and curassows, is that they want them to fletch arrows, but they're hard to get. So they really want them because they classify them under this broad category that you hear in other places called poes. And basically it's like edible, like a term. Some people say poes refers to a specific curassow, but some people use poes like turkey-like bird, like a turkey, meaning a good edible bird. So the birds that they fletch arrows with are coveted food items. All right. I feel that, yeah, if you were to bring conventional archery tackle in, you would see that diminish. Now, other people will have shotguns, but the limiting factor there is how expensive the ammunition is. So they'll have like the shotgun shell, Or they might have a handful of shotgun shells that would last them a long time because they would only use when absolutely necessary. Like the village, they've been having a jaguar problem. When we were there, they had, over the previous 2 months, lost 24 dogs, including a dog while we were there, to a jaguar who comes in at night and kills dogs and chickens. Whoa. He was speculating that at some point in time they will probably have to get rid of that jaguar, and that it would be a firearm issue they would have to like figure out a solution for with a firearm. So even people that might have a firearm have limited ammunition, and it's sort of a tricky spot in a legal situation for them to have a firearm. But bows, I think that they would knock the shit out of curassows and guans if they had good bows, but then might not hunt them as heavily because they didn't need the fletching. For fishing, I think their tackle's superior. Close to superior for bow fishing.
Why is that?
Because the shots are so close, it just isn't really necessary. It's just not necessary to have that kind of investment. And you just tend to lose arrows bow fishing. So it wouldn't make sense to have very expensive fiberglass arrows when you can make an arrow in 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then you're still limited to very close range shots. When I was in Bolivia, where they hunt for a bigger variety of stuff, including monkeys, bows would be a game. Like compound bows would be a real game changer on monkey hunting.
So they're not monkey hunting, and
they won't touch them.
Really?
There's a couple things that are really hard to talk. Earlier I was saying, like, you have this luxury of being able to have like good conversations in English and get your questions answered.
Right.
Some things you really you hit a wall. Okay. Now, one of the things you hit a wall on is if you say to someone like, "How many days out of the year would you guess you do X?" It's just like you never get there. You never get there.
Do they not understand years?
No, they do, but it's just like, because we speak in that way, it's hard for me to understand why that's such a hard question. But it would be very hard to get satisfactory answers about how often do you do something. Another thing is, how much do you like do you like hunting or fishing more? Isn't something that's thought about. Because I'd be like, do you like to hunt more or farm more? You have to do both.
So it's not like the luxury that we have.
Like, but
of
what
recreation.
do you like? But you have to do both. You can't just do one.
But he was telling you he hunts 2 days a week. He farms 2 days a week. So you got 7 days in a week.
Yeah, but that was after me like asking the same question 1,000 times and finally kind of getting to a spot, because they contradict. Because one time I pushed him, how many days a year do you hunt and fish? And we talked about this for forever. And he came up with the figure maybe 200 or 250. Then later, I'm like, how many days a week do you hunt and fish? And I asked him that 1,000 times and got 2. Now, if you do the math, one of those numbers is wrong. It's just not. And also, like, what you like most. Do you like this most, like that most? Another thing is, why don't you eat X?
Right.
But if I think about it, imagine if someone came from another country to here, and you're driving them around, and every single thing they see that's alive, if they said to you, why don't you eat that?
Right.
Why don't you eat that spider?
Right.
I don't know, bro. We just don't eat those spiders. Why don't you eat that cat? Well, that's a really complicated question. Like, we don't eat house cats. Let me count the reasons why we don't eat house cats. You know? So when I'm like, why don't you eat monkeys? He's not like, oh, silly, we don't eat monkeys, because it's just like, we just don't eat monkeys.
But they don't have any weird relationship with monkeys, right?
No,
They're not
and the more I
pets.
pressed him on it, it wound up being, he would say, because we have so many fish and they're so easy to get. But you hunt white lip peccary.
Now, white lip peccary, for folks who don't know, and does that look like a javelina as well?
Yeah, so it's a little bit bigger than a javelina. The main difference from a human perspective, looking on the two, what you would jump at is the gregarious nature of the white lip peccary. So there's 3 peccaries. There's like the Chacoan, I think it's Chacoan peccary, which I've never laid eyes on, white lips, and collared. And the collared peccary, a dozen is a giant group of collared peccary. That's like a big ass group of collared peccary. And that's what we have.
Look at that sucker.
Yeah, and that's what we have in West Texas, Arizona, parts of New Mexico, right?
So it's essentially the same thing as a javelina?
The collared peccary is the javelina. Same exact thing. The white lip peccary. Now, remember I said like a dozen is a bunch of collards. Javelina. I've hunted those in the U.S. and I've hunted those in Mexico. White lip peccary will run in a group of 100 to 200.
Whoa.
And white lip peccaries, when I was mentioning cassava, white lip peccaries are hell on cassava patches.
They eat them.
They come in and eat the stalks.
Not the root.
They'll destroy the cassava patch. And they'll dig, but they particularly like to eat they'll come in and they like to eat the young shoots growing up.
Now, can they eat the cassava, the root? Or is it poisonous to them as well?
Don't know. I don't know.
Huh.
That's a good question, though. I wish I would have asked that. If I had a week, I would get a satisfactory answer out of that. So the white lip peccaries will come into the village and raise holy hell. Everyone run and grabs their bows, and then they start shooting, and then they'll chase them into the jungle and maybe even track them for a day, trying to whittle away at them because it's a great meat. It's like the favorite game meat is white lip peccary. They like it better than collared peccary because they're bigger.
But is it like a pork or something like that?
Well, but they have that scent gland, so they're very looks like pork, has a very strong off-putting. The animal has a very strong off-putting smell.
But the meat doesn't.
No, if you handle it properly and keep it clean, it would never be regarded like as good as pork to the American palate, but to the Makushi palate, it's the best. So their whole thing, like, we don't hunt all these animals, various animals, because we have so many fish, flies out the window with white lip peccary. But a lot of the white lip peccary hunting is also related to the protecting of crops. Now, as long as Rogan can remember, Rewa Village has had a group of white lip peccaries that would come through the area trying to raid the gardens. And when it came through the area raiding the gardens, they would kill some number of them. And then they would track them into the jungle and stick with them and kill a handful. And when that happened, was a very good thing. They liked the peccaries. There's been a number of years where no peccaries, where something happened to this group of 100 or 200 peccaries. For years, they have not been through the village. It's not attrition, because he was saying at the most, when they come through and get us, he would say on average we would actually kill between 1 and 4 when they come in and hit the crops. If we stick with them and a group of guys goes after them, we might kill between 1 and 4. And there's 200 of them. So it's not like they like slowly whittle away at them, right? It just would never account for that. But they vanished. Rogan never wanted to explain to me why they vanished. But I kept pestering him about it, and eventually he told me, here's the deal. Since Rewa Village is now so wealthy and we have so much food, other groups and other villages have grown very jealous of us. And he told me that a shaman in another village got so insanely jealous of Rewa's prosperity through fishing for Arapaima and through all the good hunting and fishing that they have. That he got so jealous that he this shaman locked up their peccaries. He doesn't know where. Perhaps in the mountains. They're locked up. Now, getting them unlocked is difficult, because at the time that this shaman locked up their peccaries, they happened to be without a good shaman in their village.
Did they have a bad shaman?
Yeah, they have a shaman in training.
He's a bum?
He is a young shaman in training, and his powers are slow to develop.
So what happened to the old guy?
Don't know. This guy's powers have been slow to develop. He's getting there, and soon he will hopefully be in a position to unlock the peccaries.
Now, what's a young shaman? Is it like a young president?
You know, I don't know. I didn't meet him.
Oh,
he doesn't really like. We brought up wanting to go talk to him. Got the sense that wasn't the best idea to go visit with him.
Really?
Yeah.
There's only 300 people in the village?
305.
Wow.
And I brought it up a number of times, just got the sense that it wasn't the greatest idea to go talk to him.
So is there theatrics involved? Is this guy like living on the outskirts of town and
No,
putting war
I know
paint
that he
on
lives
and-
in town.
But he
Now-
just claims mystery?
Yeah.
He like,
So here's a handful of things that was said. Like Rogan was telling me, and I want to say, man, I do not like if I'm here. Okay, if you told me something that I thought was outlandish, I would fucking jump on you, right? And I'd be like, that's ridiculous.
right?
Now, that desire to like be right and to dispel wrongness, like I don't have a lick of that shit when I'm talking to these guys, right?
Right.
I'm never like, well, I don't buy that, right? It's just like, it's so inappropriate
Right.
feeling.
Right.
And it's so interesting to me and also gives such an interesting glimpse into how most cultures and societies were structured long time ago in pre-Christian times, right? That it's just educational. So I'm not in any way, I'm never saying like, well, I don't buy that. I'm just saying like, oh, okay.
Right.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So
magic.
yeah, so
Lock
I'm
'em
not
up.
in any way, I'm never like, but here's some things that were explained to me. If you're having a problem where your archery skills go downhill, like you have a few misses, the way to correct that would be to go up and take the hand that holds the bowstring and punch a beehive. And then hold your hand up to that hive because they don't miss. And they will demonstrate their accuracy when they bombard you. And Rogan was saying that most of them even know to hit you between your fingers where it really hurts. You will then absorb that accuracy in your hand, and you will do a lot better shooting.
Huh.
And the more you can do this throughout your life, the stronger it will make you. It's also helpful, just even with kids and other things, it's also helpful to be hit by like a bullet ant, for instance. I had that happen to me before, and it's awful. But to get hit by a bullet ant to absorb some of that ant's strength. But this shaman that fucked up their peccaries could also just be jealous of you and strip your ability to shoot accurately.
And what these?
I want to point out that Rogan has an email address. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. You can email him. I email with him.
Wow. And he's firm in his beliefs.
Yep.
This
But
is not-
also, yeah.
But he's
That
also
and,
rational. He seems fairly rational outside of this.
Listen, it's like I'm torn even talking about it because like I don't want to like I'm torn talking about it because I have such a love for him as a person that I wouldn't want to say that would like dispel that idea of like that he's not perfectly rational. Like I would go anywhere with this guy. Extremely capable, but you're talking about just like some long-held belief systems.
So their cultural belief systems are just deeply ingrained,
Yeah.
and there's probably some sort of a placebo effect attached to all this, where
sure.
they've seen it in effect.
Yeah.
Where someone is cast. What is there's a
Some point in time, those peccaries are going to come back into town,
yeah,
and
then what?
Where will credit fall?
They'll probably say the shaman has relaxed
They'll
his
be like,
grip,
awesome.
or
they're
maybe
back.
the new shaman
Yeah, or
is
someone
going
won
to take
out.
credit.
It's just a way of explaining the volatility. Here's the other thing. Like, you know, you could go. Well, let me give you an example. I'm going to make a point about the way to sort of see a culture in transition, right? Because it's always so relative. But there's a staff writer at the New Yorker, one of my favorite journalists of all time, John Lee Anderson. You might be familiar with his book Che. Like he wrote sort of the definitive Che Guevara book, Che. He's a war correspondent, writes in troubled spots around the country or around the world, John Lee Anderson. He wrote a piece not long ago in the New Yorker about a group of people that had just made, that were making first contact with the outside world just recently, 2015. They were initially regarded as an uncontacted group that lived in the border between Peru and Brazil in the jungle. And for whatever reason, they started coming out to a main river where they were having some contact with other groups and they killed a couple people with bows. So the government was in a situation of, when dealing with a first contact group, you can't go in and just start putting people on trial and shit. Like, it only leads to more problems. So they were trying to, it's an article about the difficulties of leading, of introducing a first contact peoples into sort of a constructive engagement with the outside world. A trick there is, some people look and they have, some countries have a policy of isolation for uncontacted people and try to enforce isolation. Other theorists on this, or other anthropologists, think that that's completely unfair. That it's the most human of tendencies, is to find other humans and swap ideas with them, right? It's
Right.
like, it would be laughable that I would come to you and say, Joe, I'd like to prevent you from meeting the French, lest some aspect of Frenchness rub off on you.
Right.
Now, they're worried about other things too, but they're worried about like disease and stuff, but also a tendency to alcohol can be destructive, being lured into prostitution, all forms of exploitation, trying to protect people from this.
Well, isn't there also the romance of running into these uncontacted tribes and wanting to cherish that?
Some people, yeah. So
Some
people
you've
say
seen
that,
those photos that they took from the helicopter where they see these people, they're covered in war paint, they're pointing arrows at the helicopters.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
and that's the shit that I'm guilty of.
Right.
Because even though that's why I was going to lead up this thing, where this battle I have in my own mind, right? That even though, I mean, they are far, far away. They're, far, far removed from a first contact people. They're not even, like I said, the guy's got an email address. I'm not trying to paint this
Right.
as something it's not.
Right.
But at the same time, they make their bows from raw material out in the jungle and hunt and fish for all their protein. I love that shit so much. And I like laying in bed. Even if you told me you can never go back, I want to lay in bed thinking about that occurring, right? I want to lay in bed thinking about a guy having a problem with his shaman, because it's just so refreshing and like mentally exhilarating to just know that that's going on. So you get caught in this kind of, it's almost like it's like the opposite of colonialism or something, where you
Right.
get caught in this thing of wanting to be like, oh, these precious, cute people, if I could just keep them like how I like them, where they stir my imagination,
Yeah.
I just want them to stay like how they are, because that's how I like them. Like when I come down to visit, I like to know that they're all doing the shit that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
But they're, in no way are they perceiving their experience in that way. But you go down and see, like, in the handful of years, as much as they've changed all the time, right? In the handful of years, to see that just like practices are different, dress is different, clothing very different.
So you're just seeing it happen
You're seeing
in
it,
real time.
it happen in a fast way. Now, you might come up and be like, oh, I was in the U.S. in the pre-internet days, and I came to the U.S. in the post-internet days, and man, is that place different. But you're watching it, like, wherever you live, you're also seeing that happen too. So you're living that transition. But to go to there and then come back 5 years later and see things different, it really, yeah, man, it fucking, like, as much as I hate to admit it and as wrong as it is, but just to be like absolutely upfront, it kind of bummed me out. So when you talk about from a hunting perspective, because I tend to view the world through a hunting and fishing perspective, when you talk about bringing bows down,
Right.
my first thought is, oh, that's no fun. They shouldn't do that, because I like watching them hunt with the homemade bows.
Right. No, it's totally rational and it completely makes sense.
Yeah, it's just it's
This
a
longing
thing.
for nostalgia, and then you find it. You find it as it's changing. As much as you know about the American West, and as much as you told me about the history of the American West and the Native Americans, to see these people that are essentially like, in some ways, like the Native Americans before the colonial people arrived.
Yeah, or like I guess it would be. This is a bold statement. If there's an anthropologist or a historian listening, they're going to pull their hair out. But it would be like, I'm so hesitant to even throw this out. Just, it is extremely approximate and full of holes and full of contradictions. But some kind of post-contact scenario, and I don't know, like let's say it was the 1890s or something right here. The firearm was very much a part of stuff, you know. But yeah. So it's like, but you know, it's complicated in the internet age. But at that time, we had definitely established a form of tourism in the American West, right? By well before Francis Parkman. So Francis Parkman was this figure. He wrote the definitive history of the French and Indian War. But in 1842, he was a historian. He had health problems. In 1842, he did a tourism trip out on to the Great Plains. He met some fur trappers, some mountain men. He traveled with the Oglala Sioux. Crazy Horse, who probably wasn't Crazy Horse yet. He was named Curly as a kid. Crazy Horse. He was in Crazy
Curly,
Horse,
like the Three Stooges.
Yeah, I think that was like a name from. I don't even know it and have no idea what it meant.
Huh.
Before he adopted the name Crazy Horse, he would have been 13 years old. And Francis Parkman traveled with them as a tourist, and they went into the Black Hills of South Dakota. They went in there to get lodge poles because it was a time of year when they would go and fit out their lodge poles for their teepees to replace broken lodge poles. They went up into the Black Hills, killed some bighorn sheep by throwing rocks down on them off a cliff, went and shot a bunch of buffalo, and he was out there like as a tourist. Okay. Wow. So tourism in the American West. Now you got to remember the last free roaming, the last like non-confined Plains Indians didn't get rounded up till, depending on your definition, 1876, 1877. So he was out there way before that. There were still like what they described at the time as hostile wild Indians were running around, and he was traveling with them as a tourist. So I just bring that up to bring this idea that here's this group of people who are very much engaged in tourism. Like I was down there because I wanted to go on a river trip. And it's something I've done a handful of times. I wanted to go on a river trip and participate in their hunting and fishing and food gathering activities as they engage in them, the same way they might engage in it if I wasn't there. That's why we weren't fishing. Yeah. That's why we weren't catching Arapaimas and letting them go. So there's that in the internet era, but it's like there's that thing I always return to. It's like you're still hunting and fishing all your own food or growing it in your yard.
Now, when you guys went down there, did you participate in the hunting and fishing, or did you just observe?
No, participate in it.
You participated with their traditional tackle, or did you use your own stuff?
I've done both. I've hunted fish with my own bow, and I've hunted fish with their bow. And in the end, I wound up, the first time I went down, I hunted fish. The second time, too, I hunted 4 fish, so bow fished with their gear. But then it always felt like somehow funny, too. Because, like, there's a thing that happens when you're watching like goofy, you watch like goofy survival shows and shit. There's always the part where the host, grapples with how difficult it is to master ancient technologies. But you're trying to just pick it up and do it from scratch. Okay? Rogan has been shooting that bow at fish he's 32 years old. He's been shooting that bow at fish for, let's say, 27 years. It is not an unusual thing to him. All right? So when you go pick it up and you're like, man, you got to give props to these guys for being able to kill fish with this bow. It's like, well, kind of and kind of not, because if you spent 27 years doing something, you're damn sure going to be good at it. The same way as if you took someone, like one of these first contact peoples from between Peru and Brazil, and handed them my laptop and said, hey, pull up my Gmail contacts from scratch, he might be like, man, I got to give props to you guys. I had no idea, right? It's just like absurd.
Yeah.
So I was having this conversation with someone the other day where, the first time Daniel Boone, in 1760, Daniel Boone went through the Cumberland Gap for the first time and dropped down into what's now Tennessee and Kentucky. And he stayed there hunting hides. He was a hide hunter. Stayed there hunting hides for 2 years. Ran out of gunpowder, made his own gunpowder. And made it out of bat guano, your own piss, potash, right? You can cook this shit up, right, and make your own gunpowder.
Wow.
And I always look at that as being the epitome of woodsmanship. And the fact that he could do it makes him seem otherworldly.
What kind of formula do they have for how much piss, how much bat guano?
It's just something they knew.
Do you know that bat guano used to be something that was so cherished people would go to war for it?
Yeah, for explosive.
That's fucking incredible. Not just for explosive, but also for fertilizer.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's the term batshit crazy. Like the
Crazy
people
or
would,
batshit?
people would fight for batshit.
Yeah.
They would go nuts. Like, it was so valuable.
That's where all the buffalo bones went after the near extermination of the buffalo.
Really?
Yeah. But the really good shit was bone china tableware, and everything else was fertilizer.
Wow.
Yeah. But you could make some of the same characters that were involved in the slaughter were involved in picking up the bones. They're called bone pickers, picked up for fertilizer. But no, I didn't know that about bat guano.
I had no idea that bone china.
Yeah. There's still bone china.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I thought China was always like some sort of ceramic.
There's a place in Detroit on the Rogue River in Detroit that the Rouge River, Rogue River, depending on what dude in Michigan you're talking to. There's a place there called the Detroit Carbon Works that used to. So when you're watching movies, including The Revenant, you know that giant pyramid pile of buffalo skulls that turns up in every book, every movie. That photo was taken at the Detroit Carbon Works, and what they were producing was bone fertilizer.
Wow. Is there more than one of those photos? Whoa, Jesus.
It's everywhere.
Wow.
You can't escape that picture.
That's an incredible picture.
That's taken in Detroit, Michigan, where I'll point out was one of a handful of states that never had buffalo in the history in the history. There's no buffalo in Michigan.
So they were not extirpated out of Michigan? They just
those were
never
picked
there?
up. Those bones were picked up in the American West, shipped by rail to Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, turned into bone fertilizer, and then shipped back out for people tilling up the Great Plains.
Go back to that photo again. That photo's so disturbing.
Dude, it's wild.
How many skulls is that?
In my book about buffalo, I'm describing that picture, and I say that the man standing on top is like an exclamation point at the end of a long sentence about death and destruction. Because look at him. It's like he somehow realizes the weirdness of what he's involved in, but that was post-extermination.
There's a crazy podcast from Dan Carlin on the Wrath of the Khans on Genghis Khan, and they describe how the Khwarezmian Shah sends a group to check out Jin China, and they got there like about a year after Genghis Khan had killed everyone in the entire city, over 1 million people, and they thought what they saw in the distance, they thought was a snow-capped mountain. As they got closer, they realized it was a pile of human bones.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, those guys were hardcore back then. Shit to
hardcore
have
as
now.
it gets. Yeah.
Jonestown wouldn't even have been a blip.
It would have been nothing.
It'd be like, oh, a minor. It would be like a car crash.
He changed the carbon footprint of the human race. Him during his time. They don't know how many people they have
through depopulation.
Through depopulation.
Cooking fires.
They believe they killed more than 10% of the population. Like Genghis Khan and his people, through his orders, killed more than 10% of the population of the world.
And wasn't he the #1 land conqueror, but just never held on to anything?
Well, they lived
conquered
in
more
tents.
than conquered more than Napoleon, conquered more than Hitler, but just didn't hold it.
I'm not sure about that. I don't know about that, but I know that they always lived in tents, and they despised people that lived in homes. They thought they were pussies.
They probably thought that after their life, they probably thought they were vulnerable too.
Yeah, probably, right? Yeah, I mean, just anybody listening, Wrath of the Khans, it's a 5-part series, and I think Dan Carlin, he charges for them. You can buy it on iTunes, but I think it's only $1 per, and is the best dollar you ever spent in your life.
And he's done World War I.
Yes. Yeah.
And not sure what else he's done.
He's done a lot of, his podcast is just absolutely amazing. He's incredible and a super humble guy. Won't call himself an historian, but meanwhile has the best history educational series you can get.
Yeah.
It's $1 a piece, and they're like an hour and a half long, and they're fucking incredible. Yeah. He's a real treasure, that guy.
Doesn't call himself an historian because he doesn't use like primary source material or something, just reads popular works?
I don't know why. I mean, I know he...
Because who owns the name?
Yeah.
Who owns the definition?
He's just really humble.
Yeah, I got it.
You know, but his main focus of study, his entire life has been history. You know, and when he does these things, well, it's like if he calls what he does a podcast, I need to change what I do. Because what I call a podcast is just it pales in comparison because we're just sitting here talking, right?
Yeah.
What he does is he prepares for these things for months and cites different sources
and
and
does a
references
lecture.
and then essentially does an educational entertainment piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he doesn't like the term historian, is because he's not contributing. He's not contributing to the body of knowledge. He's interpreting the body of knowledge.
Right. Maybe. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe. I think he's just super humble too. He just wouldn't say that no matter what. But somehow it's, I don't know why, more disturbing to see a pile of human bodies than it is to see a pile of the buffalo bones.
Yeah, I think I told you, and I've talked about this 1,000 times, what, after the Custer Massacre, the guys that were following the other soldiers who were coming in after the Custer Massacre, they didn't know what had happened. You know, they hadn't got word yet that Custer and his entire command had been wiped out by the Sioux and Northern Cheyenne. And they're riding up the valley, and they're looking off in the distance, and they see all these sort of white, bloodyish things and all these dark brown things. And one of the guys wrote that their initial impression, looking at it, was that Custer must have caught the Indians in the middle of a buffalo hunt. And what they were seeing was, it was summertime, and they were seeing fatty buffalo carcasses that had been skinned, and that the brown things were the buffalo hides laid out next to the carcass. But when on closer inspection, it was the brown things were horses, cavalry horses, and the white things were stripped and mutilated soldiers. It's a good image.
Wasn't one of the guys, one of the Native Americans that was in the Little Bighorn, whatever event, wasn't he one of the guys who toured with Wild Bill?
Many of them.
So they had killed American soldiers, and then they went on this entertainment tour.
Yeah, it would be as though, it would be like, this is a fucking risky comparison. No, I'm not even going to do it. It's
you going to say
risky.
Nazi?
No, I definitely wasn't going to say that because it's way different. It would be like, shit. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to make the comparison. It'll come back to haunt me. I'm trying to think of something that would work. It would be like a people that we now fought against later became a media celebrity.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess they're kind of dealing with it right now in Colombia, where the FARC, right, now that Colombia has struck a peace accord with the FARC, and the FARC are entering into politics, entering into media, FARC commanders who spent their entire life fighting against the Colombian government. Many atrocities were traded back and forth. They now come on the Colombia equivalent of 60 Minutes to do interviews.
Wow.
Okay, so it's like where you have an adversary that hostilities end and the reconciliation is so complete and so quick that you can become a media personality.
And this guy was a touring media personality,
so
right?
Gall,
That's
quite
the big
a number
giant
of them.
guy, right?
Yeah, Gall, who
How do you spell his name?
The historian Evan S. Connell, Jesus Gall.
And there's some photos of this guy, right?
Yeah, there are photos of him.
See if you can find that.
Evan S. Connell, he was huge.
Yeah.
And the novelist who wrote sort of my favorite Custer history, he says that Gall went through Custer's men like a wolf through sheep. And yeah. So
that's a hard-looking man.
Someone
Look at
asked
that
him
face.
how long it took, how long that fight lasted. He said it lasted about as long as it takes a hungry man to eat his dinner.
Wow. That is a hard-looking gentleman right there.
Yeah.
That face, man.
So he toured all over the country. People would pay to see him, pay to get their photos taken with him.
Wow. He did selfies? Selfies with people? Wow, what a crazy thing that must have been.
Isn't it
so
wild?
They had some mock war that they would do?
Yeah, they would come out and reenact the battle.
Wow.
Yeah, so you could go down, and this would have been in your own lifetime. The people who, the families of the men killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn could have gone down and got their photo taken with and paid to watch and interacted with the gentleman who likely cloved their father's head in with a tomahawk.
Jesus Christ.
we're not as like. We always want to think about how much worse we are now, right?
Is that Buffalo Bill up there?
I don't know if that's Hickok. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think that's him, but that's from his show.
Wow.
Buffalo
I'm sorry, what were
Bill.
you going to say? We're not that far removed?
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, we now think we've gotten to such a weird spot. But, yeah, you want to point out that people must have been a tad more forgiving at the time.
Well, there must have been much more used to death and murder.
Yeah.
Because it was so common. And it was so personal because, you're doing it with hatchets and axes and guns that don't fire very well. So you're doing it at close range. You're shooting people with muskets from...
And there was so much more violence then.
Yeah.
And so much more death.
Yeah.
The fact that you can grow up and be so old now and never see a dead person is like just a new idea.
It is pretty crazy.
I got people my age that never seen a dead guy.
Yeah. Well, it's a real eye-opener when you see one. There's a lot of people that haven't even seen a dead animal.
Dude, I could sit and rattle off the dead people I've seen. It's
How many
burned
people
in my
have you seen?
mind. How many dead people have I seen?
Yeah.
Not 10.
What have you seen dead people from?
I saw 2 people that were not just dead, but in bits after a plane crash. I saw...
Whoa, where was that?
Fucking not even a mile from my house.
Holy
when I was a little kid.
shit.
Yeah. And then
Commercial plane or like one of those little private
there's a
suckers?
57-year-old man and a 13-year-old kid. Ooh. I tried recently briefly to go back and find the article, but here's how the story went down is the way I remember it, a detail that I remember very clearly is that this guy, it was his neighbor kid, and he had told this kid's parents they were going down to wash the airplane and look at the airplane, and he decided to take the kid up for a flight. I don't know if that's true or not. I was trying to find that article to confirm that aspect of it, but I lived on a lake called Middle Lake, and everybody remembers this. For whatever reason, this guy buzzed our lake a couple times really low. There was a guy down on the east end of the lake named Mr. Rupert, and I remember what was unusual about Mr. Rupert was he would eat freshwater clams, which we were forbidden from doing by our dad. But
why is that?
It's just not. People don't regard it as a good practice at all to eat freshwater clams because of toxins. That's another thing I haven't really looked into why that doesn't happen. But people just generally don't eat freshwater clams. But we would go get them and clean them, and I remember we cleaned a whole shitload once. And my dad's like, no. But Mr. Rupert would eat these freshwater clams. And
would he go raw or would he cook them?
I'm sure he would cook them. He said, "Man, I saw that plane." When it dove down over the lake, it went up, but then dove down again and never came back up. And he even told some neighbors this. The next day when we wake up, the sheriff's posse, our area had a bunch of volunteers who had horses. And they were like the mounted sheriff's posse, right? Like deputized individuals during emergencies such as this. They were all loading up their horses to head out into the woods to look for some plane. And another detail that was told to me that I wanted to verify that I just need to go back and go through the microfiche where I grew up and find the article, because it was something like it had a signal on it, and the signal was picked up by some other country even. But they knew that a plane had gone down. And that was a matter of fact. Everyone at this point knew that this plane had gone down. And we were riding around on our bikes out in the woods, just kind of following these sheriff's posse guys as they were sort of combing through the woods. And eventually a news helicopter was hovering over a spot like right at where the end of White Lake Drive. And there was a news helicopter hovering over there. My 2 brothers went directly there on their bikes, and I was younger. And for some reason I went and got my mom, and then we drove over and we got to the end of White Lake Road where you had to walk into the woods. And there was a guy there that tried to block my mom and me from going in there. And I always remember he said, if you're going to go in there, you better have a strong stomach. And she's like, well, my kids are in there. And so we go in there, and Matt and Danny are just standing at the edge of the hole there. And they're trying to sort out. They're trying to sort out who was who inside this plane. Wow. Into bags. I'm not shitting you, man. Like, and yeah, I have like some visual details I remember from that, just like, yeah. And then it's kind of macabre, but yeah, I like, and then that was, that, and then remember we were at our neighbor, Mrs. Musselman. I remember we were at her birthday party and the caterer just fell over dead in front of everybody. So like stuff
Those
like
are
that.
Very non-war related things, right? That's
No.
what's interesting. Is most
I'm just
people-
saying, like, but you can see that these are just like happen chance things. But
Right.
yeah, you can go through life. We just have it sort of set up now, where you can be hidden from it. But then you talk to previous generations, it was just a part of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, my old man talked about walking. He grew up in Chicago. He talked about walking out of a party one time. There's a dead guy at the bottom of the stairs that had been beaten to death. Just like then went off to World War II and saw who knows what. So yeah, when people talk about how now we're so violent and shit, there's nothing to support that.
Nothing. No, it's the safest time to live ever.
You used to be able to hang people from trees and not get in trouble for it if they were the right color.
Yeah. Not that long ago.
No.
That's what's crazy about this Wild Bill Hickok shit. We're talking about what, 1870, 1880? When was it?
And what's funny is he was one of the combatants. So some of those guys like Wild Bill Cody and Wild Bill Hickok actually had like a dispute over who got to have the name, Bill. Buffalo Bill Cody, Wild Bill Hickok. There's some other Wild Bills, I guess, and it was like a popular name, right? But they were combatants too. So they engaged in these wars. And the fact that you would later get both sides of the war, it'd be like if you went and got a bunch of Germans who were defending the Normandy beach, Omaha Beach, and you got a bunch of the Americans who were storming Omaha Beach, and you had a traveling road show in which they would pretend to inflict mass casualties on one another for paying adoring crowds.
How bizarre. Who came up with the idea for that?
I don't know,
Had
man.
that been done ever in history before?
I don't know. My guess would be, there's a thing that I've told people a bunch of times, no one ever believes me that it's true, but it's fucking true. It's true. There was a guy one time, Niagara Falls, right? You been to Niagara Falls?
No.
Big damn waterfall. The St. Lawrence drains the Great Lakes, and on its way out to the Atlantic, there's a big ass waterfall in Niagara Falls. A guy one time there was like a zoo was liquidating its holdings, and a man bought the zoo and bought a barge and put all of the zoo animals on the barge and charged $1 to watch him send his barge full of animals over the falls. Yeah. Wow. So, right?
Yeah. Not that long ago.
Now what happens if you
you go to
nowadays
Nowadays, they'll put you in a cage. Yeah.
So it's just we've traveled.
What is this, Jamie?
This is like from when the when the show started in the World's Fair. He got denied from doing the show outside of the World's Fair,
Who's
like
he?
1893.
Wild Bill Hickok. You're not talking about.
Sorry,
Okay.
William F. Cody. So I don't know which one is
Okay.
which. But he found a 14-acre swath of land where he set up stands for 18,000 people to watch each show, and over 2 million people saw it during during the World's Fair that year.
God.
That's how.
Which is
he
like
was the first one. But.
And there weren't even there were 2 million saw it, but there were probably way less than 75 million people in the country.
Wow.
What year was it? In World War II, there were 150 million.
That's incredible. 18,000 spectators, 74 Indians from the Pine Ridge Reservation of South Dakota. Wow. 18,000 spectators must have been amazing back then.
Yeah, no, but think about the numbers at that battle. That historians feel that at that battle, that was the largest gathering of Plains Indians to have ever occurred. An encampment of maybe 10,000 individuals.
And how many people were there from, what's his face?
Custer?
Custer.
He rode into one end of the camp. That's why it's not well understood. Like, there were other engagements going on at the same time. When you say, like, Custer, his command was annihilated, there were other prongs to the attack that were repelled and beaten. But it was only, like, one prong of the attack
That had Custer in it.
that was annihilated.
And how many people did Custer have
He
with him?
rode in with about 200 people.
And ran into
an encampment of 10,000 individuals. And later, some of these individuals, like Gall and others in interviews, said that even at the time, our understanding is that these people were all hopelessly drunk.
Oh, my God.
Because it did not make sense what they were doing.
Wow. They just didn't know.
No one understands. That's why Custer. That's why there's still all these Custer people who just debate and argue, and is like some of his Crow scouts. Okay, he had some Cree or Ree scouts and Crow scouts who came and told him, you cannot go down there in the morning. They were planning to attack at daybreak, and they said you cannot do that. That makes no sense. He said we're going. They did their death songs. Some of his scouts sang their death songs because they knew that they would be dying in the morning. And it's debated still today. To what extent did he believe what his scouts were telling him? Okay.
So was it suicidal or was it hubris?
No one thinks it was suicidal. It was either that he just didn't really comprehend what they were telling him, or he was so... he was a decorated Civil War figure and probably was a very ardent believer in the superiority of his army, and that they were trained soldiers with discipline, that there was just one prong of a three-prong attack or a two-prong attack. He was riding into one end of the village, but he just rode into the village and they were just killed. Right, and in popular depictions, they always show Custer like the last guy standing. Like there's a mountain of his dead guys around him, and he's still firing his revolver with long hair. When in fact he had short hair at the time. But some people think that when in looking at it, he probably, the great one is Here Fell Custer.
The great image.
Yeah, like
Jamie just pulled up a crazy picture.
So Here Fell Custer.
Is that a contemporary picture? Did it say what?
No, that's an old classic. There's one that was on the Anheuser-Busch.
Contemporary to the time.
Yeah, Here Fell Custer was a little bit later. But then the one that was the Anheuser-Busch one was by a German guy. I think that was the one you had pulled up. That was
Anheuser-Busch had a Custer photo?
It was like their poster.
Oh, my God.
That's Here Fell Custer.
Wow.
Which is considered to be a very accurate, it's considered to be a pretty accurate depiction of what was going on.
Now the Native American version of it.
Custer died early. They think he died earlier in the skirmish. He wasn't like in movies. He's got the flowing blonde hair. Everyone's dead, and he's still firing away.
Of course,
he was probably killed earlier rather than later in the skirmish.
It's so funny because
see right there, like he's like in a different position.
It's so funny that we've done that. That people have taken what they know most likely were historically inaccurate accounts, and they pass them down generation to generation. And it makes you wonder, like, this is what we know now because this is only 100 so years ago.
Yeah.
Like, what are we getting when we're getting some version of something that happened 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
How distorted.
Insanely.
Yeah.
But the problem we have as a culture, I think, is when someone goes to challenge our popular perceptions, it's branded as revisionist and somehow like loses, right? It becomes almost like its credentials are tarnished. Do you remember the guy? I can't remember what politician. Jamie, you'd be able to pull it up. There was a politician who said, he famously said, after we realized that Paul Revere, the ride of Paul Revere
didn't really happen.
Yeah, like fabricated from whole cloth, right?
Right.
There's a politician who said, "I love Paul Revere whether he rode or not."
Well, I mean, when we were kids, we were taught Columbus discovered the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't figure that out until it's still amazing
that it wasn't like the West Indies.
Yeah.
And
to this day, it's still amazing that they celebrate that guy when you find out that he was a fucking monster.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? I believe it was a minister or some religious person who came with them at the time left a journal about the atrocities committed directly by Columbus and his men when they, hacked off arms for people who couldn't bring them back gold. And, I mean, just horrific shit. Smashed babies on rocks, did it right in front of them. And this guy was a firsthand account of what, and we're supposed to believe, I mean, who knows how much of what he's saying is accurate, but if any of it is accurate, Columbus was a fucking monster.
Yeah. I think that what it stems from is that from the perspective in Europe at the time, he had solidified and put some shit together that people had been kind of pecking around the edges of.
Right. Whether this continent existed.
Yeah, and just had, it was like a leap forward at the time.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
But the fact that it becomes that, right? That he that in some people's minds, he somehow established America. You know?
Yeah. And that we take a day off of school because of it. That's really crazy.
It's bizarre.
Columbus Day. I mean, we still to this day, in 2017, kids get Columbus Day off, don't they?
But now it's like, here's the thing. Now that sort of the consensus, right? The popular consensus is that he was one of many players involved in sort of putting together what was here and sort of outlining where it was and how to get here. He's one of a bunch of players, almost certainly not the first. No one cares about that meaning. What they mean is you're saying I uphold the idea of Western civilization's annexation of the New World as being a good thing. So when someone says when someone gets pissed at the revisionists for questioning the legitimacy of Columbus, they're not actually talking about what he specifically did. It's become a proxy for the cultural annexation of the New World. And to say, oh, I hate Columbus, he's an asshole, they take it to mean you're saying that you're questioning our claim on the Western Hemisphere and that it was a bad thing. I think that's why people are annoyed by it.
I don't think people are too much annoyed by it anymore, because I think it's pretty much been established that Columbus is a really bad guy.
But no one's gone in and undid it the day.
Have they? Is there any?
No, they kind of change them around, don't they?
Well, they should probably come up with another name for it. Happy.
No, it's sure as shit. It's still a day, right?
I think so. Pretty sure. Yeah, it is kind of crazy though.
I'm not here to defend the day, but I do understand kind of how that shit came to be.
Yeah, I understand it. It just seems pretty incredible that just 500 years ago, here goes, the war against Columbus Day in the Washington Post.
Yeah, so it's waged by the same people who are waging the war against Christmas.
Is it really? That's crazy. Indigenous Peoples Day, in favor of Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Just give us a day off. We'll take it.
I'm generally like little movements, little cultural movements like that. I'm generally not
receptive.
I don't try to read too much into them. If I woke up tomorrow and told me that we had decided, that people got together and decided against Columbus Day, I wouldn't do a lot of soul searching on that day.
No, I wouldn't either. Well, you don't work a traditional job anyway, or go to school where you take that day off.
Oh yeah, I think people that lost the day, they're like, dude, that's my day, man.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine.
That's how I hit walleyes with my buddy Doug every year. Yeah, you'd be bummed.
It's just hard to imagine that 500 plus years ago, they really didn't know in Europe about the continental United States. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's another. We're talking about earlier we were talking about violence, right? More violent than. I think that we're so tripped up by the upheaval caused by the digital age, right? And everything, it just changed our sleep practices and just everything. It's a major upheaval.
Yeah.
But picture that in your lifetime, they all you become aware that the Earth, that there are 3 times as many or whatever, as many civilizations on Earth as you thought there were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge thing to grapple with.
A huge thing to grapple with. People that had history, people that had boats, they were seafaring.
Had more history than you.
Yeah, they're crazy.
Or to think that one day, and this is not too long ago, so, some of our grandparents remember this, to think that one day we had devised a contraption that was capable of ending life on Earth and that these contraptions could be initiated by the distant actions of a handful of people. That's a change, right?
Yeah.
The nuclear era.
Here's the craziest change in the nuclear era. From the invention of an airplane to someone dropping a nuclear bomb from an airplane is less than 50 years.
Yeah. I think Wright brothers, 1903, right? 1906, 1903.
Early 1900s.
First sustained flight with a heavier-than-air vehicle. Yeah. And then in 1945, they dropped an atomic bomb.
That's crazy. That's inside my life.
Someone's like, I knew this airplane shit was going to take off.
But that is probably one of the biggest changes ever in terms of like the amount of in 50 years in the world, to go from no air travel at all to dropping a nuclear bomb out of an airplane in less than 50 years.
Yeah, and to then have it be that it's a staple of American life. Not just where other people, like space travel, you're like, okay, it's this flood of information, but it's not affecting me. But with that, it's like, that's now how you get around.
Yeah.
You know, that you, like, at a time when you wanted to cross the country, you would lose a large percentage of your party to death, right? You had to plan ahead. It would take many, many months to being just a thing you just do on a whim. Now, I do believe, like, I accept that we are in a state of upheaval right now, and I think that we're probably impacting ourselves in ways we don't fully understand.
How so?
Digital devices.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Just how you run your day.
Yeah, no doubt.
How you spend your time, how you run your day.
Well, ever go to a restaurant and you see a whole group of people just staring at their phone?
Yeah. Yeah, we were laughing about this the other day. If you're staying at the baggage claim, not looking at your phone, people are going to think you're nuts.
That's true.
My friend.
You're just looking around, trying to make conversation with people.
My friend Rogan was talking about a conversation his wife was having with someone where someone said I was in Starbucks drinking a coffee, just sitting there staring at the wall like a fucking lunatic.
Yeah,
you know, if you're like, what's wrong with that person? What are they up to? Are they going to start killing people? They're not doing anything with their phone. It's a big thing, but one of the helpful things, just to bring it full circle, one of the helpful things, you know, about traveling or about like just reading about history is you lose some of that sense of specialness about thinking that the life you're living in the moment you're living it is this great test of humanity or some like super peculiar thing going on. And you realize that people have always been involved with and struggled with cataclysmic upheaval, you know, and then to go to go witness some other people in some version of that transition is pretty healthy, man. Maybe in the long term, like just traveling, going to see how other people do stuff. It's unsettling, but probably ultimately pretty good for you.
Yeah, I think it's very good for you. Just anything that enhances perspective. It gives you like another layer that you could consider when you think about life on Earth. We're so used to our own environment, our own ways. It's like you were talking to these people and asking them, like, why don't you eat monkeys?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, we just don't eat monkeys. Has he ever been to a supermarket?
That's a good question. A couple years ago, when I was mentioning that, I'd mentioned to you that a couple of American companies who have like some conservation spending they were training some guys from Rewa Village. They were training some of them to just how to interface with Westerners. And as part of that, he might have even gone up to the Bahamas to go for a couple of days to a fly fishing lodge. So yeah, he flew on a commercial aircraft.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Just what we just love to see.
But he's peculiar in that way. Now I've brought up to him, I'm trying to talk him into coming up and going, I want to take him on an ice fishing trip. So I want to take him up to Alaska to fish through the ice. Because what I want him to understand is I'm so uncomfortable with him, physically uncomfortable with the heat, with everything biting me all the time. Just everything. It's just extremely uncomfortable.
And to him, it's standard.
Yeah, it's comfortable. But he's never, like, if he hadn't done that trip, or, you know, or just all of his siblings and most other people in those villages, they've never experienced 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Now, what is it like to them when it comes to bugs? Do they have any sort of resistance to mosquitoes or anything along those lines?
they don't care about it nearly as much as we care about it.
Do they get the same amount of bites though? Do they get chewed up like we do?
Yeah, they complain about tick bites and stuff, but it doesn't seem to bother them nearly like we do because it's just a part of everyday life. Like you got to get used to, you know, in hanging out in Bolivia, you get bit by bees and wasps at about the same rate that you'd get bit by mosquitoes if you were at like some 4th of July thing out at your uncle's pond, you know, shooting fireworks off at night on the edge of a cattail marsh.
Really?
It's like you're just getting bit. You just like wake up and you start getting bit by bees and wasps. So they just get kind of used to it. And then you'd say, like, I remember when I got stung by a bullet ant, asking like, hey, how many times have you been stung by bullet ants? And a lot of them would be like, I couldn't even begin to guess how many times I've been stung by bullet ants. But it's like, but they just suffer different. So what I want to do is I want him to experience suffering while watching me not suffer. So like, I want him to look at me with awe. Okay. And so to do this, I want him to come up and ice fish. Where I'm going to take him up, and I got a friend who likes to get on snow machines in February or March out of Fairbanks, and they go overnight camping on snow machines fishing through the ice for burbot. So
what's a burbot?
Oh, they call them freshwater lings or you know why they call them lawyers? Is when you gut a burbot, his heart's way back next to his asshole, so they call them lawyers or vent. You know, fish have a cloaca. They have a uni hole. You know, we have like
a bird.
Yeah, we have a couple outlets, and they have a single outlet for waste and sexual exchange. So yeah, lawyer, burbot, freshwater ling, poor man's lobster is another word for it. It's a northern fish. Looks like if you combined a snake and a bullfrog, kind of. Yeah, I want to take them out to camp in a tent in 40-degree below weather.
That's it right there?
Yeah.
Wow, what a cool looking fish.
Burbot. Very good to eat.
Yeah?
Very good.
Wow. Now, are they commonly caught through the ice, or did people catch them on the street? That's a northern pike.
That's a northie. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's kind of burbot or not.
But
they're in the Great Lakes. They're all over. They're
really?
in Alaska. Yeah, there's burbot everywhere.
So does it taste like lobster? Is that why they call it a poor man's?
No, the reason they call it poor man's lobster, it doesn't really taste like lobster, but it's suitable for boiling it and dipping it in butter and cocktail sauce and eating.
Really?
Yeah, but you also make fish sandwiches with it.
Huh.
They even sell that shit commercially. Burbot. Guys that Native American, like, so in the northern Great Lakes, you have the Ojibwa Indians still carry on White Lake. They fish for Great Lakes whitefish. They trap net Great Lakes whitefish. They're able to sell bycatch of burbot, and they have restaurants in the UP. I got some friends that do it, and they have restaurants in the UP that they sell their burbot into, and they make burbot sandwiches.
Huh.
Freshwater ling.
That's
so I
interesting.
want to take him on an ice fishing trip, and but for him to leave, like, he doesn't go into Georgetown, which is the capital of his country. He'd have to go into Georgetown and start like trying to figure out some kind of visa situation and a passport.
Does he have a birth certificate?
I don't know what he has. I told him that I would try to help him with all that, but he said it's like a very daunting idea that you would like go and leave the country.
Wow.
Or that you'd go in and stay in Georgetown.
But he has been on a commercial flight.
He did that trip, yeah.
Yeah, so he has done it.
Yep, he has done it.
But he said
he had to get a passport in order to do it. His passport didn't last long, and now he has no passport anymore, is what he's telling me, when I was asking him about the feasibility of this.
Uh-huh.
And then you don't need a visa for there, but he needed a visa to come here. But I'm going to figure it out. I want to have him up so bad.
Wow.
Him and his brother, Dennis. One of the things that one of the things you get is, you're from, what state were you born in?
New Jersey.
Yeah, see, it's like you've been all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that you hunted and fished and farmed, and that's all you did. So
Only
you're
in New
always on the
Jersey.
land.
Yeah.
And you've done it all within a 20-mile radius of your home. So you're outside hunting and fishing or farming or gathering in the jungle every day, and you're in your 30s or 40s, and you've done it in a radius of 20 miles.
Wow.
To what level you understand your spot, and without the distractions of the digital shit, and without the distractions of an occupation.
Oh, he doesn't work at all.
Now he guides a little bit every year.
for the fish.
He guides a little bit, but typically not. Like most days, he's not engaged in that activity. So the spatial awareness is the thing that's most striking to me in spending time with these individuals is everything. I'm interested in what they notice and what they never miss. It's like you realize that all of the bits of information that you're able to contain in your head that allow you to function and carry on, right? You're like a comedian and you do shit with MMA and you have a very successful podcast and you have a family and you're digitally very astute and you have opinions about fucking coffee, right? All the shit, you're widely read, right? That's like all, you sort of fill up your brain with as much as it can hold. But for them, it's like, it seems to be, from my perspective, it's like all of that breadth of knowledge but crammed into the natural world to where every plant, every tree, what are its uses, what are the other things. And it's like they know as much. Like they know as much as we know. But it's just focused in a way that our breadth of knowledge, which would probably be astounding to them if they realized all the shit we knew about, but all those bits of information are just applied in a different way, down to like a granular understanding of the jungle.
It would probably be very bizarre for them to see us like walk like out to this parking lot, these little patches of like plants. We don't have a fucking clue as to what they are. We pass through them like they're just peripheral.
There is no like, oh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Wow.
No.
They know everything. And there's
toxicity.
How many thousands and thousands of different varieties of plants and animals?
You know, at various times there's 1,500 species of birds. Listen, there was never a moment when I heard a bird call. There was, I never said, hey, what's that bird? That everyone there didn't say what the bird was. Oh. Bird sounds. Just from sounds. It's like you can't, like, and the shit that, like, yeah. It's almost just something you have to go see is the ability to just like move through the jungle and notice everything.
Now, are they like the people in Bolivia where they're barefoot most of the time?
Yeah, but you know, that's another bummer is getting more into shoes, man. Rogan still likes to take his shoes off when he goes into the jungle. Like we went into the jungle after some curacao and he pulled his shoes off to be extra quiet. But yeah, so he'll now and then put flip-flops on now. And before, there's no way.
Wow. Do they still have the weird feet that are all just calloused and toes are spread?
Splayed out. Yeah,
it's very strange the way their feet look.
Real strange. I was I was in the Philippines one time in the highlands where people are just hiking mountain trails, like in, severe topography on rocky ground, and the feet there, I've never seen anything like it.
Barefoot.
Yeah, but it's just like it's almost unrecognizable as a human foot.
Really?
From your perspective of a human foot.
What does it look like?
Have your man here.
Is there photos of their feet?
Type on Luzon Island, Luzon Island, Highlands, Kalinga, Kalinga feet. I don't know. Try that.
There's probably some high-resolution National Geographic
you'll see
photographs
some
of
crazy.
people's feet.
If he's any good at his job, you will be seeing some crazy feet in a moment. Another thing I wanted to share with you, I mentioned a sort of a surreal image is, watching a woman in a DKNY shirt, like digging turtle eggs for food. There's flowers. Everything's in bloom, right? It was just the beginning of the rainy season, so there's some rain, like everything was in bloom, and these flowers, just all flowers of all variety, hang out over the river. And sometimes you'll pass through and it just has this like warm, floral smell that's just it's astounding. It reminded me of, in the end of Apocalypse Now when when Captain Willard finally catches up with Kurtz, and Kurtz asks him where he's from, and he mentions Ohio, and Kurtz tells him about a river trip he took with his father on the Ohio River when the gardenias were in bloom, and he talks about the smell in the end of Apocalypse Now, but these flowers would smell like that. But when the rain would come, what's going on? I can't even see what.
I got something, but
you got some feet?
Oh, you'll find some feet, boy.
I got one. I was trying to find something better. Here's
So it would rain. It would knock all the flowers into the river.
Oh, wow.
And, like the way...
Nah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Whoa.
from grasping.
Wow. They're like almost like a gorilla's feet.
Yeah, from wrapping your feet around
Things.
rocks and stuff while you climb.
That one in the middle's
Yeah, no, I saw like a number, quite a few people that had feet that resembled that from
Grasping.
because down in the Amazon and other areas you're just walking on soft ground, but imagine if you're just like walking on slippery rocks and you're using your feet in a way that's not even uncommon.
So what we're looking at for people that are just listening to this, it's like at the middle of their foot, especially that one foot in the middle to the right, it's like it's taking a turn, like a hard turn, like a 15-degree plus turn.
Why do those seem like disembodied feet?
Because they're just photographing the feet, I guess.
They're real old. This is like a big article about some people from the Philippines, I think, from the same area.
Oh, huh.
So what go back to it for a second, Jamie? Because what we're seeing in this is this massive spacing between the big toe and then the first toe, to the point where it
it's
looks
like an opposable.
a hand.
It's an opposable toe.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Seems like
Almost like an opposable toe. Yeah, almost like a thumb.
No, I'm sure what's at play there
that's
too.
What's really fucked. Like it makes you wonder. Like at one point in time, was it like that?
That's the thing is you wonder is, and I don't know the answer to this, but my guess would be that over time, that they're not starting out with your foot. Like over time, that's just been something that's been selected for,
Right.
in a population of people.
Like height or like
some
like
people
they're
just like
whoa,
selected for
look
you
at
to
this
have.
guy's feet.
Yeah,
Holy
very common.
shit. Holy shit. We're looking at what looks like frog feet.
But that's not even
Crazy?
Asia. That's North America.
Yeah, just typed in
Huaorani?
indigenous people feet, and then it's got some other photos.
Huaorani. How do you pronounce that?
Harani.
Harani?
I'd have to check where that is.
God, it's bizarre. But it really does show you
From
that-
fucking wearing shoes your whole life.
Yeah, and given the different environment like that, that's insane. Like what we're looking at here, they literally look like thumbs. Like they're sticking out of the side, but it's the same structure as a human foot, meaning that it's the same length of toes, and just you see that from using it that way, they've just developed this incredible... You know what's really crazy? What is one of the hallmarks of civilization that shows like the really poor choice in footwear? When your feet go the other way. When they go in an ineffective direction, they get that hammer toe and they climb over each other. These people have functional feet to the point where they could probably hold something with their feet.
Yeah. When I look at my wife's feet, I feel like it's like she's got a foot that seems very much like shaped by a lifetime of office footwear.
Oh, it's awful, especially with women. They get that hammer toe, that bunion thing, where their toes are kind of crossed over to the side.
I know that thing well.
It's so weird. It's a weird choice that someone has decided that women should shove their toes into these pointy things.
But just like with that I saw a group of individuals lock on to polarized sunglasses as being the shit. If you went back in 5 years, I'm telling you, instead of everybody being barefoot, everybody's gonna be wearing shoes.
What if you got those women high heel shoes and said, "This is what all the women in America."
That's a stretch.
Of course,
I think it'd take a while.
But that's disgusting. though. That's foot binding.
That's just fucked up right there.
That's just insane.
I can't even tell what I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, that's her toes curled under.
It's from binding your feet.
That's foot binding in China. Yeah, it's soft tissue. It's very flexible.
Oh man.
Go to Cirque du Soleil. Look what those people can do to their bodies. The human body is pretty bizarre in its ability to adapt. But
those groups that used to bind their children's head to that backboard to flatten their head out.
Well, how about those people in what part of the world was it where they have that the Incas, where they have those lines, the Nazca lines, you know, and they've found all these skulls from people back then where they had stretched their heads out and almost made their heads look like aliens. Yeah.
There you go.
But see if you find the Inca skulls. It's so much so that a lot of the really loony people said, look, they're trying to be like the aliens that have come down and given them knowledge. And
oh, yeah. Have you ever been down to, do you remember those, they're held in Salta, Argentina. I went to see them one time, but those children that they found that were entombed at the top of a mountain, and they were basically freeze-dried.
No.
It's perfectly preserved children.
What happened to them?
Well, they were taken up and given as an offering. So first, it seems, based on the stuff they had with them, that they were paraded through the Incan Empire, and people lavished them with gifts. And when they look at the isotopes in their bodies, it's like their diet, their whole lives, they had just had potatoes. But then you can see that toward the end of their lives, they were very well fed with meat and fish and all kinds of stuff. And they had just innumerable treasures, gold pieces, carved pieces. So they were taken, it seems as though they were taken throughout the empire. And what's really funny about this, speaking of Columbus earlier, is it was like, yeah. So,
wow.
It's like, as best they haven't dated it exactly, but it seems like, I mean, it seems like we're talking about, you know, Columbus 1492. It's like we're talking about 1491.
Wow.
So the height of this empire at the height of the empire butting up against its dramatic and sudden collapse with European contact. But they took, I went to see, and she was on. They made a deal with the indigenous people where they only put one on display at a time, but she was on display when I was there.
And what do they have how do they have her encapsulated?
So they took them. Well, I'll tell you how they came to be first. So they were finely dressed, had a lot of ornaments and things with them, had been very well fed. And the older and they took them up to a high peak. I can't remember how high. They might have been 14 or 15,000 feet above sea level. And they built a little tomb for them and sat them in the tomb. They were drunk. They had a lot of rice wine in their bodies when they died. The oldest one must have put up some kind of struggle because she was hit in the head with a hammer or an axe. And they were just laid out sitting in this thing and then capped over with rocks. And it's a very stable environment. So they froze. And then, you know, we use now like backpacking food as freeze-dried food.
Yeah.
They used to do a very similar thing by just taking potatoes and storing them at high elevations, where what freeze-drying is your liquid, it's like you freeze something and then expel the liquid, where the liquid goes from a gaseous, or goes from a solid to a gas without passing through its liquid state. So when you freeze dry food, you put it in a freezer and get it super cold, and then you start putting it under a vacuum to a point where all the water goes immediately to a gaseous state, doesn't pass through a liquid state, so it holds its form, but all the water's gone. If it goes to a liquid state, then it collapses, but it just holds its form, and the non-water parts of the cells just stay bound in their natural shape. So they were in this position and eventually just like expelled tons of water without ever thawing out. And when they found them, you can even see that they had been chewing cocoa leaves because of the high elevation. The kids still have dried cocoa leaves on their lips. Dude, it's wild. Wow. Yeah, me and my wife went there to look at them.
Where is it now?
It's in Salta, Argentina.
Wow.
Very near the border with Bolivia.
I wanted to ask you something totally unrelated, but it came up because you talked about freeze-dried foods. I know you cook a lot. But have you ever, I know you eat those mountain house things, but have you ever tried to make your own? Have you ever tried to dehydrate some of your wild game?
Oh, yeah, I've dehydrated. I mean, anytime you make jerky, you're dehydrating stuff.
Right, but have you ever made like chili and things like that where you could rehydrate it in the field?
I'm trying to think if I've ever made dehydrated. No, I've assembled a lot of dehydrated things, but I've never, at what point, how many ingredients need to be in something before it becomes like a recipe?
Just
2?
A couple. Yeah.
Pemmican, that's a recipe.
What is it?
Pemmican. That's got 2 things in it.
What's pemmican?
Pulverized meat with liquid fat poured over the top of it.
Did you know what that is? No.
People fuck that up all the time, what pemmican is.
I've never heard of it before, I don't think.
Yeah, so
if I did, I forgot it.
It's like the original road food. You dry meat into jerky, air dry meat into jerky. Then you pulverize it into what looks like sawdust. and then you take and stir it in liquefied fat. I made some from a buffalo I killed when I wrote my buffalo book. I made pemmican from that, and I had it in my fridge just as an experiment. I kept it for 7 years.
A survival food that can last 50 years.
But that's not pemmican.
It's not?
It doesn't look like it. I think it looks like jerky sticks.
Because it's not pulverized.
People just now started all of a sudden calling like
different
I'm not
things.
saying hardly everybody messes this up, but it's like a thing that gets messed up. So, what was I getting at? What were you asking about? No,
I was asking about.
No, I never dehydrate.
Food.
I never dehydrate a bunch of different things and combine it into a recipe that I then bring with me. The reason I use dehydrated food, and a lot of backpack hunters use dehydrated food, is because if you have a dish made up of dehydrated ingredients, they have different hydration times. Okay, so if you do beans, like a piece of meat is going to be digestible to you. A piece of dehydrated meat that's then hydrated is going to be digestible to you. A dehydrated bean might take 30 or 40 minutes before it's going to be in a condition that doesn't rip you apart. Like if you want to fuck yourself up, eat straight dried beans.
What happens?
It's
like
just
rocks?
you're off. Yeah, you don't know. Your stomach doesn't know what to do with it, man. Well, it knows what to do with it. It starts producing voluminous amounts of gas. Right?
Ooh.
It's awful. It's horrible. But if you take food and cook it to a ready to eat state, and then freeze dry it you can rehydrate it kind of like simultaneously if you do everything right.
Okay.
Now it wouldn't work with like a hamburger, right? If you dehydrated a hamburger and then you add water to it, you're gonna wind up with a soggy ass bun. So the trick is like finding things that are gonna, in a hot water bath, are gonna all come back to life kind of at the same time. But places that make backpack food out of just dehydrated but not freeze dried ingredients is a recipe for disaster.
Really?
Some people like that shit, but for day in, day out consumption, I'm a freeze dry man.
And is freeze dried something you could do at home?
You'd have to buy a sublimation chamber, so no.
What is a sublimation chamber? What does that look like?
It's a chamber in which sublimation. You know what it looks like? It looks like looks like a submarine.
Really?
But small, but it's very heavy duty. Because what you're doing is you're taking food, you take ready to eat foods, and freeze it.
Right.
And then you put it into a sublimation chamber and pull a very strong vacuum on it. And the air pressure gets to a point where the liquid sublimates and goes directly to a gaseous state. And you condense it on another surface inside the chamber, but it's out of the food. Then you take the food out and it's like glass.
Wow.
You can shatter it. That's freeze-dried food. But it rehydrates in a real nice way. I have heard, we eat a lot of it because we do a lot of backcountry trips. I've heard everyone's complaints about it, but it's like, from my perspective, which I will argue is a well-informed perspective, it's like, it's the lesser of two evils.
It's not that bad.
For day in, day out consumption, I think that the companies that do freeze dry, it's just better, in my opinion. Now, when I say that these children were freeze dried, I think some people, people are going to challenge that because it's not technically freeze dried, but like a similar thing going on where they're keeping their form but shedding their water and shedding water, keeping their form and being frozen and preserved for a long time. So yeah, it's a trip.
Because I was listening to a podcast rather, where this guy was talking about how he's doing that with his own food for backpacking trips.
Dehydrating it all.
But
sure, man. Why not?
Things like chili.
Yeah.
Things along those lines.
Is he cooking chili and then dehydrating, or just dehydrating the components?
I think dehydrating the components. I think he was talking about dehydrating the meat and dehydrating pasta, like something, like taking some meat with sauce and then putting it together with a pasta.
Now, my brother one time, he's a very frugal man. No, that's not the right word. He just hates to see food go to waste. He one time had a bunch of roommates and they all moved out and left a ton of rice, and he got sick of cooking rice because it'd take too long. He cooked all the rice and then spread it out on sheets and dehydrated it in his dehydrator and reverse engineered instant rice.
That's insane. Does it take that long? What does rice take? Like 20 minutes? It seems like it'd take more time to do that.
You have to talk to him. So this is the same guy.
Is this the same guy that found the hobo's underwear and stole it?
Yep. And the same guy that one time our dear late friend was getting married, and the wedding was at his bride-to-be's house, and a neighbor was away on vacation. And the neighbor that was away on vacation said, you know, since we're out of town, if you guys want to use our home for some of your wedding guests, go ahead. And so all the groomsmen were lodged up in this house of this man we didn't know, who was the neighbor of his wife's parents. And I don't know why, but my brother got to snooping around in this guy's freezer and found that he had a bull elk in there that had been in there for 7 years. And he had like this crisis, this moral crisis, where he's trying to figure out, is it morally worse to steal or morally worse to allow this man to waste this meat?
How long will a bull elk stay good if you freeze it?
You're fucking pushing it at 7 years.
7 years. Like what is like commonly agreed upon?
It depends who you ask. If you ask me, the way I cut, trim, and wrap, I don't even blink at 2 years.
2 years is fine.
Yeah. The way I cut, trim, and wrap.
But when you start seeing 4 years, you get a little weird?
Well, a thing that I don't let it go. I've never even done it. I would have to think it's going to start to go because the texture will change. The texture will change. 7 years, there's two things going on. One, you're borderline, and two, you're starting to get the idea that this guy isn't going to eat that thing.
Right. Yeah.
So he weighed it out in his head, and when he left, he had a bunch of that meat with him and took him home and ate it because he just hated to see a elk go to waste.
How did it taste 7 years
Don't
in?
remember. We had to ask him.
Wow.
But his standard of good is different than your standard of good. His standard of good is acceptable in cases like that. So
that is a weird crisis, though. It makes sense.
But he, throughout his whole life, he always is running into these situations like where he just like cannot let food go to waste. So he's like, if I talk to him right now, there's probably 10 more things like that have happened to him since I talked to him last. Where he's like, when he found in his alleyway one time, and he's living in Montana, still is in Montana, living in Bozeman, found in his alleyway like a discarded cache from a homeless man, and ate all that guy's food. And he was a PhD candidate at the university.
You grew up with him.
Yeah. So I remember
Do you understand him?
The first time here's where he kind of like, not where it came from, but he drew a bear tag when we were in Michigan, and it was hard to get a bear tag at the time. And he drew a bear tag, and the only way to hunt bears in the UP is like, you know, you're not going to spot and stalk hunt them because it's flat ground and you can't see shit, right? You know, you're going to use dogs or you're going to use bait, or you're not going to see a bear. So he started a bait pile, and the way he was feeding his bait pile ahead of the season was just dumpster diving. So as he's dumpster diving, it's like he's living off, not only is he baiting the bear with the dumpster food, but he's like living off the dumpster diving food that he found too, because he like discovered this great richness. And I remember him.
God.
He found, I'm not shitting, he found this big boxes of expired bugles, you know, those little crackers.
Yeah.
That people like shoot cheese whiz into the open end of that bugle. And I even got a picture of him. He just walk through the woods with boxes of bugles under his arm and get out, and he'd be like dumping them out for the bear and then just eating the bugles too. And then he'd walk back with a handful of bugles. Just hates to see wasted food. His old girlfriend had a job cooking like the brown food in the Albertsons, you know, like the display case where they fry all those like burritos and shit. Mm-hmm. And she was bringing all that home, and they were living off the food that was going to the garbage. And they came to her and said, "You can't steal this food." And then she started stealing it quietly.
Wow.
He can't stand to see food go to waste.
Well, that's probably noble.
You know what's extra nice is he works for the USDA. So it's good to know that a person like that is involved in, you know, is at least in the room with people who are thinking about food systems.
Is it good? Because it seems like he'll fucking eat anything.
Dude, he will. He's on a different level. I mean, on a different level of toughness and shit, you know? He's the guy whose arm is shrinking because, remember I was trying to hook you up with?
Yes. Yeah.
He's got a muscle.
Yeah. Did he do anything about that?
Nope.
Oh, Jesus. That's not good.
No.
Once you get that atrophy, it's very tough to get it back. The way his nerves regenerate takes a long time. It's like a half an inch a year.
He chronicles its decay by taking he's got a 30-pound kettlebell, and he was chronicling its decay by watching it's his tricep. So counting how many tricep curls he could do with that kettlebell with one arm and one with the other. And I think the last time we were talking to him, it was 30 or something like 30 on one side and 10 on the other side.
Oh, Jesus. That's bad. So that's a neck issue then. That's like a C3 or C4 or something like that.
He's gone. Yeah, I shouldn't say he's
nerve?
gone. No, he hasn't. I shouldn't say he hasn't done anything about it. He's probably, if he listens to this, he's probably cringing because he would feel that he has. But
tell him if he's listening. There's a couple things you need to do. It seems to me like it's a neck issue, because when you start getting elbows and things where your arm starts atrophying, usually it's a cervical disc, which is somewhere up in here. What he should do is get a neck decompression device. They're inexpensive. They hook over a door. You put it on with Velcro. You strap it, and I have one. It hangs on a thing. It's like you're hanging yourself by your chin.
Making some room in there for all those nerves.
Exactly. And, well, same principle as these toes spreading out, and then also toes smashing up. You can kind of soft tissue stretch out your neck and decompress all those areas. A lot of people have it from bad posture. A lot of people have it from athletics. I got it from jiu-jitsu. From all this, getting your neck yanked on. See that thing right there that lady has?
Yeah, man.
That's a shitty one, because that one's working on a bag of water. That doesn't work with a neck like mine. You need to be able to hang.
You need to hang a rhino on the other end.
I have a thing where I go like this, click, 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 and then I let myself hang from my neck. And the more, it's just like that. Just like that. See how that guy's just sitting there?
Reading a
book?
magazine.
Yeah. And you can adjust that. So there's a little cord. It's tough to see in this photo. But there's a cord you pull, sort of like a plunger on one of those old school toilets. You pull that click, 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 click. See how he's pulling it right there?
Yeah.
And then you just relax. And you just got to learn how to go with it and sort of relax. And it feels weird at first because there's a lot of pressure. But it's pulling your neck. Literally pulling your neck. You can feel sometimes when I'm really relaxed, I feel like pop. I feel like something pop. Little tissue separations in there.
Do you feel that it's gotten better long term?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it feels like really relaxing. Like after it's over, I feel like, I feel like it just takes a weight off you.
No shit, yeah.
I think there's a tremendous amount. I think sitting is terrible. These seats that we're in right now are exceptional because they're ergonomic chairs.
If you use them right.
Yeah. I'm pretty cautious about sitting up straight. But from back injuries, I've been very, very cautious about working out all the muscles around my back, which I just worked out and I figured those things would take care of themselves. Now I treat them as like, just like brushing my teeth, like my spinal column and all those supporting muscles in the spine. Those are huge. They need to be exercised. And especially if you do anything, like you guys pack out a lot of weight.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And I feel
that's
like
where he feels that a different, he had sciatica.
Right, that's lower. That's a lumbar issue.
Yeah, that was a different thing. But he knows, he like traces that to a specific animal
that he was packing out.
Yeah,
makes sense, because sciatica is a disc that's bulging, meaning the disc, the soft tissue in between the two hard bones is pushing out and it's pressing up against the nerve. And it causes pain that shoots down your ass and your lower legs. And a lot of people don't even recognize it as a lower back issue because maybe their back is not really that painful, but the leg and the ass is painful.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is going on here? I had a similar issue with my neck where it was pushing on my ulnar nerve, and I was getting this elbow pain. And I was like, fuck, this really hurts. Like down my arm and in the back of my tricep. And then I started getting numbness in my fingers. And that's when I started figuring out what was going on. Then I went to a doctor. I went to a chiropractor first, which is a fucking giant mistake. I spent a year.
But do you not believe in chiropractors?
I don't believe in chiropractors at all. I think it's 98% horseshit. That's what I think. And I don't know, but I think chiropractors that are smart, they incorporate things that I think are beneficial. Cold laser, massage, a lot of different things. But I think that manipulation that they do, unless you have like some sort of significant scoliosis or something they're attempting to slowly put back into position, I think most of the time it's just popping your neck and it just feels good. But I just...
Like in an immediate sense.
I went to a guy that's a very nice guy, and he was trying to tell me that I didn't have a bulging disc because he was pushing down on the top of my head, and it didn't hurt. I'm like, okay. So I was listening to him. I listened to this guy for like a fucking year. I had treatment with him, and I still had these neck problems and back problems. And then finally I got an MRI, and they're like, yeah, you got a bulging disc. And I remember being angry. Because I was angry that I was being treated by someone who was a professional that really didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And they were treating something that was a significant issue that I was experiencing, a real deterioration of my function, pain. I wasn't able to do jiu-jitsu correctly. There was a lot of problems that I was dealing with that I was like, well, what the fuck is this? Like, and then I started talking to doctors about it. And when you have a bulging disc, man, they want to cut you open like you're a piñata and you got gold inside of you.
Well, that's a thing that my bro is talking about is he's very nervous about a procedure that he could or could not do.
Well, for some people, it's not a bad move, depending on whether or not your brother's willing to do all the different things that can. But he's got a lot of atrophy already, which is a real bad thing.
It's noticeable.
Yeah, that's not good because that shit doesn't grow back.
Yeah.
Bas Rutten has it real bad. Bas Rutten, former UFC heavyweight champion, he fucked his neck up and went through a bunch of different treatments and then eventually wound up getting it fused. He's got, I believe, 2 discs and maybe more in his neck fused together where he doesn't have any disc tissue. They just screw the bones in together and remove the disc tissue and stabilize the area. But his right arm is significantly smaller than his left arm to the point where he calls it baby arm. And this is a former UFC heavyweight champion of the world. And what's ironic is that some of it came from fighting, but the last thing came from doing a stunt on Sons of Anarchy. He was in some sort of a fight, I believe it was Sons of Anarchy, some sort of a fight scene where they were, doing something, and some guy was supposed to like throw him on the ground. He landed on his head.
So all that actual fighting, and you get fucked up pretend fighting.
Isn't that hilarious?
Dude, yeah.
And it's bad, man. I mean, it's slowly starting to come back, but I've known Bas to have this issue for. We worked together on a movie before my 7-year-old daughter was born, and he had the issue then. And so for 7 years.
And still now does.
And it still does.
Yeah.
It's come back slowly. But what I'm talking about is like, I think there's the way that your nerves regenerate is extremely slow. They can deteriorate quickly, like the atrophy can happen pretty quick, but the way it regenerates is extremely slow. So they say once you have atrophy, you're fucked. Like you got to act on it right away.
That's the thing they told me when I had Lyme disease is that a thing that fucks you up is the nerve damage.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people go on to think that they always have it, but they're like, you had a thing, it's treated, it's gone, but it'll live with you for so long because of the damage to your nerves. It's so slow to recuperate.
I talked to a doctor about Lyme disease, and he said it's not just the Lyme disease that you're dealing with. He said Lyme disease is this overall term. He said you can get a tick that has 100 pathogens in it.
When you look at that list of shit, it gets scary.
It's scary as fuck. And they connected it to Morgellons. Do you know what Morgellons is?
No.
Morgellons is a disease that a lot of times they think is psychosomatic because there's some sort of a neurotoxicity involved in Lyme disease. And all these people that have Morgellons almost without a doubt have Lyme disease as well. And what Morgellons is they start itching at themselves and they think they have fibers growing out of their body and they start hallucinating. Well, most of the time it's treated as a psychosomatic disorder. Like they'll get carpet fibers in their body and they'll claim these carpet fibers are coming out of their body and growing out of their skin.
Yeah.
But I talked to this doctor who was the only lucid person that sort of explained it to me because he's a doctor and he has Morgellons. And he was saying, and he also has Lyme disease. And he says, like, to a person, they all have Lyme disease, that he's encountered at least. But he was saying that he was looking at himself in the mirror and he saw something moving across the surface of his eye. And he knew it was a hallucination. And he realized it was a hallucination as a doctor, as an educated man of medicine, and still was seeing it and was freaking out. And then he realized, like, oh, there's some sort of an extreme neurotoxic effect that this stuff has.
Yeah.
And then he started doing, like, some pretty deep investigation into what constitutes Lyme disease. And he's like, well, it's not like, you have herpes, No, it's not like that. He's like, you get bit by something. You got a bunch of shit in that cocktail of whatever that disgusting tick is carrying around, and it's variable. You know, you might get it from one part of the East Coast and it has, 50 things. You might get it from another, it has 13 things.
Yeah.
But he's saying with the people that have Morgellons, what he believes is they're suffering from hallucinations brought on by Lyme disease.
That's a thing about Lyme that I found was about medicine and about people and about mysterious diseases is like, I quit doing it now, but I would get in arguments with people where like I was trying to deal with it and finding out about it, and people were telling me like, "Oh, here's what's happening to me." I'm like, "Well, no, I was told that's not how it works," because there's so much. The same thing you bring up earlier about a doctor or a chiropractor telling you the wrong thing. There's so much subjectivity in the fucking medical world.
Yeah.
That it's like on one hand, all these people are sort of going through this this regimen, this educational regimen, which is, it's like there's like government oversight. There's certain criteria you need to meet, right? Things you need to pass. And you think it would sort of like have this unifying effect. But people come out on the other end who've gone through kind of the same educational system telling you fucking wildly different shit.
Yeah, wildly different shit.
About the problems where one guy, like, you could walk in, one guy is going to, like, do a surgery, and the next guy's like, oh, no way.
Yeah. Who was it that had the cyst
it's just like
in his balls? Who was it? Wasn't Steve-O, right? Who the fuck was it?
Oh, that just said that Santino, I think.
Andrew Santino. Yeah. He was telling me that he had a cyst in his balls and he thought he had ball cancer. He went to a doctor, and one doctor told him that he has excess cum stored up in his balls. That it's sperm that's stored up in his balls, and that's what's causing this knot.
He went home to his wife and said,
He went to another doctor. No, he wasn't married at the time. He was a young man. He went to another doctor, and the second doctor said, who the fuck is that doctor? That guy should lose his ability to practice. Like, you don't get cum stored up in your balls and it makes some sort of a knot. Like, he's like, that's insane. Who told you this? And a fucking real practicing doctor told him that.
Yeah, I used to go into it when I was younger. I'd go into it and thinking it was like going to... It was like going to get an oil change, right? That, like, you could have 20 people and they're all going to change your oil like the same way.
Yeah.
Well, what we do is we drain it and put new shit in. I'm like, great. Now I realize that it's a fucking roll of the dice, man.
Roll of the dice. And here's the big thing when it comes to health.
You can mitigate that by doing some research. But it really is like, I don't know what the guy's going to tell me. He's not going to tell me the same thing the other guy's going to tell me.
The big thing when it comes to health, and this is one of the things that I have a big problem with when it comes to anything dealing with the back, is preventative maintenance is like one of the most important things for back health. We're sitting in desks all day, and most people are not sitting up straight. They're not sitting. A good thing is like one of those balls, those gym balls, those big balance balls. Those are great to sit on because they force you to kind of stabilize yourself and use your core muscles, or some sort of an ergonomic chair forcing you to stabilize. But doctors are not telling you, hey, man, you got to take a yoga class a couple days a week.
Yeah.
You got to do something to straighten out your posture. You got to do something to make sure that your spine is strong enough to be carrying your body. You can't slump forward because you're putting undue pressure on these different portions of your back. There's a significant amount of doctors that are just not fucking telling you that. They're like, oh, yeah, your disc is bulging. We're going to have to do a discectomy. No worries. It's outpatient. It's an outpatient procedure. But they're not telling you. They're chopping off of a chunk of this finite material. There's a small amount of material that separates your discs. And when they talk about, oh, I have disc degenerative disorder, it's a disease. My disc, no, stop. It's not a disease. What's going on is you're compressing your body through weightlifting, through extreme exercise. Your body is slowly getting smushed down. You're not allowing it to recover. You're not stretching it out. You're not strengthening all those core muscles. You're not giving it some time off. You're probably engaging in the same damaging activity over and over again and toughing it out. And if there's one thing you should never fucking tough out, it's a back issue. Anytime there's something going on with your back, don't tough it out. Don't try to work through it. Just don't. Because you're going to fuck it up worse, and then it's going to get to a point where it just does not recover, and then you're going to have to get surgery.
Yeah. Man, this is making me super self-conscious about how I sit. I sit like Larry King, man.
So
bad. When I'm at a chair and a desk.
I used to, much more. I do try to sit up as much as I can now. But these chairs...
I feel like every time I've been here, I went away for a couple of days trying to sit straighter. After staring at you sitting all nice for 3 hours.
I try, man. I didn't always used to be good at it. I used to slump quite a bit before I had back issues.
Yeah, I got to catch up.
These chairs are called Capisco chairs. They're from Ergo Depot. You can go to ergodepot.com and get these fucking things. They're the shit. They're comfortable enough to sit in too. I've been on some of them where your knees slide in and there's a pad against your shin.
Yep.
And those are kind of gross. These seem much more like an actual chair, but they're super comfortable.
What's it called?
It's called a Capisco.
Sounds like a drink.
I know. ErgoDepot.com. No, they didn't pay me to say that. But these things are the shit. But backs, man. Backs are the one thing. Like when people have these heavy pack outs and everybody likes to pride themselves and, packed out 150 pounds, 7 miles.
Yeah.
Don't.
I'm prone to saying those kind of things.
I tell everybody, take 75 and do it twice, please. And even that's a lot, man. I have this new thing.
That's a good point. Why do people?
Why do they like to talk about? Because they want to be badasses.
Yeah, but you'd never be like, yeah, man, I jumped out in front of a truck and just jumped away right in time.
Well, people love to tell their friends, too. You know, Mike, he packed out 2 elk quarters on his back. Dude's a fucking savage. And I go, Mike's probably going to have no legs.
Like, dude's a fucking dumbass.
His fucking legs are going to stop working.
Yeah.
He's probably like got a massive bulge in his back.
I'm guilty because I traffic in those stories, and when I hear those stories, I'm like, right on, bro.
Well, you know how hard it is. That's why. When you've done a real pack out, you know how hard it is. I remember when we shot that mule deer right there in Montana, and we only walked, like, what was it, 2 miles, maybe?
Yeah.
And we had the meat split up between, like, 3 of us. So it was probably only like 50 pounds on everybody's back. And I was like, holy shit. Once we finally got to camp, 2 miles, pretty flat. It wasn't that hilly.
Yeah, if you're not accustomed to it, it's a lot.
Fucking exhausting.
Yeah, it's like if you're not accustomed to getting bit by bees 6 times a day, it's overwhelming.
So I should tell people that the Outdoorsman's, I know a company that you like their products as well. They make an Atlas trainer now. It's a
I saw you were messing with that.
It's fucking great.
And you got a weight you put on there.
Yeah, it's like an Olympic weight. It slides in like an Olympic post and it clamps down.
I thought maybe you rigged that up yourself.
No, they're selling it now. It's their thing.
I saw that.
Yeah.
You had that. I thought it was like I thought you'd like gone down to the hardware store. I knew the frame, but I just didn't recognize the.
I know guys do it, but usually they use sandbags. They
Yeah,
put sandbags in their backpack and get used to it. It makes a big difference. And it's an incredible workout.
And it doesn't shift.
It doesn't shift at all. And you can really lock it
so
down
you're not
in place.
you don't have the risk of like tweaking.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
strength, but it's not, because when your shit's wiggling around, then it like, I don't know, it doesn't really make you stronger. It just makes you more inclined to like fuck something up.
Yeah.
To twist funny.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know?
But I just implore people, just please, just exercise your back. Treat it like it's like brushing your teeth. Just take yoga. You don't have to take it, Ethan. Just get some YouTube videos. They're free. They're available everywhere. Just do something to strengthen your back. You will prevent. Most people don't want to listen to this, and they're not going to do it because people are lazy as fuck. But you will prevent a host of issues that people have just by exercising your back. Simple stuff. There's the Atlas trainer right there. Yeah, you could do chin-ups on it if you're a fucking savage. Look at this guy. It's an animal. But yeah, you could carry up to 90 pounds with that thing. So it'll take 2. I bet it'll take 100-pound plates too. I just don't know if the plate's designed for it. If the pack rather is designed for it.
That's a good idea to do pull-ups that sumbitch on.
Yeah, I use a weight belt. I put like a belt and I hang a kettlebell in between my legs. I put a 50-pound kettlebell on a chain and I do chin-ups like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's hanging where?
It's right between my legs. Like it's a big leather
But
strap.
where do the straps fall across
Right-
your legs?
Right in between. Well, the straps are on my back or on my hip like this, and then there's like a chain in between my legs, and the kettlebell hangs in between my legs.
But it's not getting your scroll at all.
No.
No,
It's swinging low. You got to make sure your legs are separated so it's not cracking against your knees. But
Yeah.
when you're doing chin-ups, it's just hanging there.
No shit.
Yeah. They say that that's the best way to get more reps in with your chin-ups is not to try like 19, 20. The absolute best way is do less but with heavy weights. Do like, put a weight vest on or hang a, 70-pound kettlebell in between your legs. Just
I've never done that.
3 or 4. Yeah. But again, you run the risk of injury because it's
Maybe that's why I've never done it.
Hey, yeah, you got to build yourself up to it. That's also one of the big things that happens to people when they start exercising. They just try to go too hard, too quick.
They go too full balls. It's like I remember at various times not running for a long time, and then being like, yeah, I'm gonna start running, and go on a 5-mile run. Oh, dude.
I've been running now for just a little over a month.
I got a friend who's a runner, and he's a hobbyist, but runs marathons, and he never did before. But he was saying he's a writer, so he's been writing about that a little bit, and he was saying he just wrote a piece about you don't run to get in shape. You got to get in shape, then start running.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a smart way to do it.
He's like, there's some steps. There's some, if you're just like a slob, right? There's some things you need to get taken care of before you embark on that.
Smart.
He's like, there's some groundwork that needs to be done.
Yeah.
To get ready for the run.
I don't like to ever discourage people from doing jiu-jitsu, but I talked to a buddy of mine who just did jiu-jitsu he's 43 years of slovenly behavior, no exercise whatsoever other than the occasional pickup basketball game for like 7 years.
Yeah.
And then he started doing jiu-jitsu and immediately his body's falling apart. I'm like, okay, I know this is going to be hard for you to do, but if you really want to do it, you got to get in shape first.
Yeah.
Just
you
push-ups.
You should have started out with thumb wrestling, then gone into arm wrestling.
Steve Rinella, you got to get out of here. It's 3:15. Listen, man, you got one of the best podcasts in the world. It's fucking awesome. I love listening to it. I'm so happy you do it, and I think you got the best hunting show ever. So
I owe the podcast all to you, Joe Rogan.
Well, listen, man, hanging out with you. Look, it's so easy for you. You have so many great stories, and you're such a good talker. I was like, how the fuck does this guy not have a podcast?
I'm glad you steered me in that direction. Thanks for the plug.
I'm glad you're still doing it. It's called the MeatEater podcast. It's available everywhere, and MeatEater is available on Netflix. And right now, it's only. How many seasons do you guys have?
Seasons 5 and 6.
Seasons 5 and 6.
Yeah, 5 and 6. We'll have more. We got more. We got a dozen episodes that are new that we're going to be releasing. So just stay tuned. And then a couple months ago, if you go to my Instagram, Steven Rinella, you'll scroll back and find a bunch of pictures you'll find a bunch of Guyana photos.
Yeah, amazing stuff from Guyana.
Yeah, like boat. We never even talked about. Oh, we did talk about that. Yeah. You'll find some pictures.
Good times. Thanks for doing this, man.